Oh, Trello with that nair out of the shield.
He's trying to get a little too. Yes.
Yeah, side B.
Up throw, up B.
Oh
my God.
What is happening?
I believe we switched the game to pinball.
Flag cancel.
Tornado.
Forward air hit.
This is Super Smash Bros. Brawl. Unlike its predecessor, Super Smash Bros. Brawl wasn't an adaptation to Melee. It was completely different in gameplay, style, design, technicality, and overall availability. This includes each of the 37 characters and their metas. Yes, that is right, another character meta video, where like before we'll be walking and talking about each of the characters, their metas, and their history in the competitive scene. Now unfortunately, due to the absolute length of this project, probably my biggest one, this can't be handled by just one man. So I am here to greet you with some friends of mine. Say hello!
Hi, what's up, dickheads?
Dumbass.
Okay.
Like, wait. Alright.
Oh my gosh.
How's it going, guys? It's the Make Sandwich.
Now, shall we... Oh, yeah. That message. I've said this before, and I'll say it once again. I am not an experienced or professional player. Although it does seem relatively easy to get good at this game. But anywho, don't take all my words as food for thought. Most of the stuff researched here are rather easy to find, so don't act as if I'm the most knowledgeable man in the Smash universe. This is all just for funsies with me and my broskies. We just love doing these kinds of informational lookovers. Got it? Now, let's get started. Whoa! I forgot. We will be using the 8th Brawl tier list for this video. Now I know that sounds a bit silly to mention, but sometime recently, at least as of writing the script, a new post-community tier list has been released. I'm sorry to say, but this is not official enough for me to validate or remix each of the characters' scripts. I mean, for God's sakes, Meta Knight doesn't even have a pure 1-point scaling. Get this shit out of here. So, without further ado, let's get this started. Meta Knight is everything. He's all you ever wanted. He can win a set now, even if you never won one. It is without a doubt that Meta Knight is the best character in not only Brawl, not only Smash, but maybe in the entire fighting game genre. There's so much this character has that basically makes him better than everyone else by a large margin, even against the considered second best character in the game. So just what makes him so damn good compared to literally everyone else? Well, he basically has no disadvantages. Let's go by this briefly. Meta Knight's worst disadvantage is probably his weight, since he's rather light as hell, meaning like usual, can be killed earlier. This is really his only strong holdback, and it's not that strong at all. Well, unless you're a scrub. He also has a rather small shield, meaning he can be shield poked, although this also shouldn't be an issue since you're going to be in the air 98% of the time, and so your defense option will be air dodging and Mach-Nado, which we'll get into later. He also has weak airspeed, although this is probably for the best. Any faster and an extra S would be put onto his tier. Now for his benefits. Meta Knight is fast on almost everything. His speed outside of air, frame data, and attacks. This, along with many disjointed hitbox, having a laser sword, meaning a lot of priority on his moves, and decent to great range makes him nearly unchallengeable, even with quick reaction time. He has a lot of combos, which is a given considering how this game works, and along with these combos he has good damage wrecking moves and power kill moves in the form of down smash, forward smash, dimensional cape, and up B to name a few, some of which can be followed up easily from his combo tools. His edge guarding is extremely broken, with almost all of his fast aerials being able to push and gimp opponents even further from the stage, and his Mach Tornado, a move so noobish that it will have its own mentioning, being a good way to carry opponents off of the stage or being a kill move if close to any of the blast zones. This, along with his amazing recovery, having 5 mid-air jumps, each of his specials giving him some kind of recovering boost, and yes, they do make him helpless, but still. And having a glide ability that grants him a KO attack makes him unpunishable for going extremely low and essentially unkillable for average edge guarding means. Most of the time you're going to have to hit him with a kill move of your own in order to actually get a stock from him. His defensive game is also amazing in a way. Although I did mention about his shield being small, his roll and spot dodges are all very good. His air dodge and his aerials pretty much make him a ghost in the air. His Mach Tornado also makes a good get off me tool and can make him escape any situation scot-free. And he's also small. And as we know, small characters in the Smash series are definitely not at all a nuisance to deal with. All of these traits tied with more minor abilities that are granted to him, like heavy sharking, favorable ledge options, and having a safer time hitting or whiffing 50-50s, along with an all positive matchup, essentially made him leagues above everyone else in this game. And this can be seen with his competitive history, as ever since the beginning of the game, he has always been seen by everyone as the #1 character, and later on it would be shown that not only was he #1, he was the best #1 character. So good, in fact, he needed his own tier and was nationally banned for a very short amount of time. At least it seemed that way until Apex 2012. Mewtwo King, Plank, Dojo, and Lee Martin were some of the pioneers of early Meta Knight innovations and tournament plays during 2008 to 2012. More players like Tyrant, Havoc, Nairo, Anti, and some international players like Rain, Atori, and Zero, just to name a few, began improving Meta Knight's already great results in meta, with a more modern example being 686M after his performance at Super Smash Con 2022 and Apex 2022. He was so off the walls that many locals and regionals banned him. Even a few majors like the Walbo series banned him for a bit. The only reason why he wasn't banned long-term at a nationwide level was from outcry of top players and international players threatening to not go to tournaments that choose to. And Apex, which was the hotspot for the Smash community, chose not to follow the ban rule, which was thought to go into effect at Apex 2012. Apex 2012 is a story in and of itself that I would like to talk about, but to get the point across, no. Meta Knight was not getting that treatment. It didn't really matter that much since the URC, or Unity Rule Set Committee, was already on a decline at that point due to some controversial decisions. This was just the final nail in the coffin. Nonetheless, Meta Knight still stayed relevant, getting first at nearly every local, regional, and major that allowed him. Seriously, I can't even show specific tournament results because he just won almost all of them. And still to this day, he keeps winning any Brawl tournaments hosted. Meta Knight is a force to be reckoned with in the Brawl metagame. He's the voice of reason and the center of Brawl and its meta. Everything from here on is associated in some way to Meta Knight and how they perform against him. However, the next character we'll be talking about also had their own small amount of controversy with how they played.
The Ice Climbers, or Popo and Nana, are Smasher's least favorite character. Yes, we're rolling on that quote again. They are a 2-in-1 character, meaning one you control while the other you half control, in a way. But when they're not right next to you, or are not idling around, their, and by their I mean the partner climber, is controlled by a CPU, with the growth level depending on the amount of damage the Ice Climbers have taken. The Ice Climbers have very small disadvantages with damn good advantages. Although they are small and light, this makes them hard to combo. Although they have weak traction with no wave dashing capability, they gain an uphold on specific stages with snow and ice as they are able to retain their traction unlike every other character on said terrain. Although wobbling has been removed, they still have a very powerful grab game with having a 0 to death chain grab on everyone. And yes, I mean everyone. Even if you don't master the infinite, they still have damage-racking handoffs and can KO opponents very swiftly off grabs due to the ability to control Nana during any grab, pummel, and throw animation if nearby. The only true disadvantage Ice Climbers have is when you lose Nana, meaning you have to play solo Popo. And although solo Popo has a few things up his sleeves, playing solo Popo drops your position down by a whole 5 tiers and raises the risk margin so high that no Ice Climber player can perform properly with solo Popo. Either that, or they're just used to chain grabbing and nothing else, so they mostly get their butt whooped for not learning half a character. I mean, that should have been obvious from the start, right Sakurai? They also gained buffs through hitbox size and range increases on some of their aerials and tilts, and were granted some KO and gimping power on some of their weaker moves in melee like down tilt, forward aerial, and down aerial. When both are together, they also possess a semi-decent recovery game, including their side special Squall Hammer, which gives them a two-sided hitbox-covered horizontal move which can rise somewhat vertically if mashed, and with both climbers present. And Belay, their up special, which gains a good vertical height with some horizontal influence. Of course, only best if both climbers are around. The only strongly effective nerf was against Nana, or the AI climber, as she had lost her passive armor ability, no longer making her less susceptible to low set knockback moves or slightly weighing her down from launches. Even then, the AI still has improved in other ways, such as being able to mash out of shield breaks and granting her weaker hit lag so opponents can't SDI out of multi-hit moves. The only other nerf I can think of is wobbling, but like clockwork, ice climbers always find a way to get an infinite off their grabs. The ice climbers in early meta were decent, but not viably strong by any means, due to the removal of wobbling, the often used stage list at times being pretty unfavorable to their playstyle, and the changes to Nana. Many did see the potential in them, however, such as Lane and 9B, the latter of which helped find advances in their grab game and helped boost their overall performances. By then, they were already considered a clear top 5 character. But soon, tournaments after Apex 12 would lead to the banning specific stages that involved sharking or transformations, giving the ice climbers an even better advantage from these. As now, they have flatter and less platform-covered stages to worry about. No worry for possible transform distributions and no worry about sharking. Although air stalling would still hinder their matchup against Meta Knight, this pushed the ice climbers to top tier, even beyond others like Diddy Kong, so much so that they had their own separate tier, just below Meta Knight. Players like 9B, Kakarya, Nakat, and later on Vinny, and even Esam on occasion, have used ice climbers at peak success, winning tournaments like Skatar 3, and getting top 7 at others like Apex 12 and Skatar 2. Nowadays, the only guys repping these suckers are Hoenn and again 686M. Ice climbers flew exponentially in the following years of the meta, eventually reaching their second place peak, far below the peak leader but way above others. Now that we're hopping into the A tier characters, we should mention about how our next character had a similar place in the history of this meta, but unlike ice climbers, his potential was viewed as unlikely to happen. But that unlikeliness didn't stop the small man Olimar from rising in the ranks. Newcomer Olimar has many distinct playstyles revolving around his Pikmin mechanic, but his general type is that of a damage racker, as he uses said Pikmin, each having their own power, knockback, and effect to do hefty damage to his opponent, whereas just himself would be negligible. Not only this, but the ability to carry up to 6 Pikmin and form a line with Pikmin Order, his down special, can lead to a very effective strategic game for the Olimar player, which can lead more in his favor if he uses his Pikmin and tools right. You see, in Brawl there exists 5 types of Pikmin, each with their own form of attack, health, and weakness. Red Pikmin can do the best amount of general damage off designated smash moves, can eat through fire attacks and cause fire damage, but are weak to water. Blue Pikmin have one of the highest health compared to the rest, even being able to take a single smash attack depending on the opponent, and having a very good grab range, but often leave subpar damage against their opponents. Yellow Pikmin have an electric charge to their attacks, which leaves opponents inactual because of longer freeze frames, and their attack range is slightly further, but they are thrown at a worse angle. White Pikmin racks up damage really quickly when in contact with an opponent, and can also be thrown at a faster speed, but have pathetic health, often dying off jabs. Finally is the purple Pikmin, a big lubby looking dude who has high health and hits like a bitch, but is often thrown very slow and can fall behind when running or dashing. That's all good, but what makes them notorious is that besides of being allowed 6 of them, they also have better pluck rates depending on the terrain. Why else do you think Olimar players like counterpicking to Lilac Cruise or Castle Siege? This makes stage selection outside of matchup preference a vital strategy for Brawl Olimar players, since some stages like Delfino Plaza are good for picking blue Pikmin but weak for red Pikmin, and others like Halberd are good for plucking yellow Pikmin but not for white Pikmin. Plucking, plucking, plucking. That's one of the things you'll be seeing a lot in matchups with Olimar. Those 6 Pikmin really do change the game for him. And by change, I mean change in his absolute favor, because without them, some of his moves don't even function. Only thing Olimar has for himself is jab, dash attack, tilts, and his neutral air. Most of an Olimar player's game is going to be plucking for favorable Pikmin, ordering their Pikmin in favorable lineups, and either throwing said Pikmin at you to cause a myriad of status effects, damage, and knockback, or just grabbing you from a wide distance and hitting you with either an aerial combo or chain grabbing you at low percents. A lot of his Pikmin have far-reaching grabs when performing a pivot, In fact, pivot grabs with blue Pikmin are downright broken for ground matches. The only issue is that it leaves a pretty wide blind spot if he whiffs on any grab. Worse for pivot grabs. Of course, Olimar does have one very exploitable weakness that holds him back more than any other, and that is his recovery. See, Brawl still uses edge hogging as a means of retaining the ledge and keeping the opponent off the ledge, or at least harder for them to get on. Now the window is this for much tighter. You can't just roll onto the stage and your opponent won't just grab it like in Melee. No, you have to use the invincibility of the grab time of the ledge, and most opponents can easily go around this scenario, or at least just not straight up die because they couldn't touch the ledge. Yes, every opponent can get around this by either being able to reach over the ledge, or can knock you off the ledge by the multitude of hitboxes on their recovery moves. Well, except for those with tether recoveries, which is something Olimar has. What makes his even worse is that it's length dependent. It's not a set length like every other one. This makes his recovery pretty infamous for being unusable when gone off stage, because more likely than not, you're never going to be able to grab onto that ledge. As a great player once said, if you're playing Olimar and you're even a bit below that ledge, just let go of that stick, man. In spite of this recovery weakness, and his over-reliance on Pikmin to do anything decent, Brawl Olimar was pretty popular in the meta, even more so when the preferred stage list for majors at the time banned a few unique stages post-Apex 12, giving him a better matchup for some characters like Marth, Snake, and most of the mid to low tiers, even if it did somewhat offset his chance of picking favorable stages specific to some types of Pikmin. What may have helped him rise in early tier lists was some pretty high placements at major tournaments from players like Brood and Niento in Japan, with the Boos and Rich Brown also giving great performances in American tournaments. Of course, Olimar had a high technical curve to him, making him hard for many to pick up. This was also a similar problem for the next character's player base, even if it came down to only one move.
This young chimp has decided to join the newest game as a wanted character for quite some time. His whole spiel is having a great ground control with great speed and unique tools. Decently fast attacks, especially down tilt, which can rack up a lot of damage at low percents going well into mid percents, along with his many other tilts, aerials, and smash attacks having good frame data. Dash attack may be theoretically his best move, as it starts up somewhat fast, has transcendent hitboxes that are good for comboing into his aerials or tilts, and is interruptible to frame after the final hitbox ends, making it positive on shield and allowing it to lead up against any move so desired. Although its ability to be SDI'd out of and being a small covering hitbox does limit its use on the ground, especially so in an air-heavy game by most of the upper class. He has some good options for recovering, such as his monkey flip for pure horizontal recovery and rocket barrel blast for somewhat vertical recovery, though it seems to go further when moving at a horizontal angle. Some annoying ass taunts, and Banana is a powerful kit that Diddy Kong has that allows him to have not one, but two bananas throw around. Diddy Kong's banana gives him a strong approach tool in neutral and a hella ground advantage when the match is in his favor, especially when used in tandem with his excellent glide toss, making Diddy an even more threatening foe when approaching on the ground. Even though it is one powerful tool, it's not the only approach controlling projectile Diddy has, as he also has his world-renowned Peanut Pop Gun, which though doesn't have the same flexibility and mental threat Banana has on most opponents, is still a decent projectile, especially given its much more larger size compared to most bullet-like projectiles. Despite these traits, he still has a weak power game with a lot of his KO moves like forward smash and down smash being tough to link together or being weakened by the scaling system. And his aerial game, while decent, isn't much to write home about. His back and forward aerial are kick style moves that work well when edge guarding, and his up air can get a good KO off the top, but his neutral aerial is somewhat inconsistent and down aerial is only worthy for edge guarding, and there are better options that can be used over it since the hitbox on this move is tiny as hell. Monkey flip is also somewhat inconsistent, as many times it would seem like you should be able to grab onto them only for you to fling past the opponent, and it feels like this is a Diddy problem specifically since a lot of the other command grabs work as intended even in this game. Nonetheless, these abilities allowed him to place well in the first tier list, but he would soon pop up even more when people realized he could essentially dominate neutral and hit infinite combos with his bananas. Players like ADHD and GNES would use him at their greatest plays, getting high placings at Genesis, the Qatar series, and even winning the highest biggest prize pot tournament in all of Brawl's history, MLG Dallas 2010, and challenging other players like Mewtwo King for top position. And although Diddy wouldn't be able to peak against Meta Knight, he would still not only hold but maintain a very high position throughout the meta, ending at 4th on the tier list. Not bad, Chimpson, not bad. Now from this point, we get down to the just barely worst cast, but totally worth A tier characters.
The young sword fighter returns from Melee into Brawl, a changed but ultimately similar man. For starters, Marth retains his long range, tipper sweet spot attacks that all have quick startup. This, along with having good speed on the ground, in turn gives him a good combo game at low percentages. He also retains a good grab game. Well, not as broken as before, but with how the grab releases are on Brawl, some characters, especially the Earthbound kids, can be repeatedly or even infinitely chain grabbed through this process. Also, with Brawl's ledges, he can recover a lot more safely compared to in Melee. Though his recovery is still pretty linear, he also has a competent counter that doesn't actually deal a flat 7% and has somewhat scaled knockback in return, which could in theory give it KO potential. I say in theory because, well, we know how knockback scaling goes in this game. A lot of his specials have been reworked to give him more reach, including Shield Breaker, giving him a stabbing strike forward rather than a slash downwards. This one actually dealing quite a lot of shield damage even when not charged fully. Some of his hitboxes match the variety of animations when performing dancing blade inputs, some of which give him further reach and also speed up the movement process between each input, making it harder to react out of shield if being pressured repeatedly. His up special also has more length to its hitboxes, making it harder to gimp him, and the move grants him longer intangibility from frame 1 to 5, making it an excellent out of shield option. He has a lot going for him, though that's not to say he's the perfect swordsman. For one, he's still somewhat light, and is often forced into the air since outside of his down aerial, no other aerial covers a good range downward or around his body. This also makes escaping air juggles, especially from characters like Meta Knight or another Marth, hard to get back to the ground from. His sour spots are also really pathetic, especially given the knockback scaling in this game compared to others. You really have to hit the tipper sweet spot if you want to actually get kills. And despite the buffs of Brawl edge grabs helping his recovery game, it also makes his edge guarding game a lot harder to pull off since the opponent can also sweet spot ledge from an even lower distance. He also for some reason has weird matchup against a few characters. I mean, he has the obvious 40-60 against Meta Knight, and goes even with his surrounding top tiers. But for some reason, also goes even with Rob and Donkey Kong. You'd expect it to be a lot easier on him given their size and his range compared to them. But hey, I don't know. Like I said, it's outdated. At least outdated within the time period considering this was made during Brawl's peak era. So it still somewhat reflects Brawl's meta, but I don't know, maybe there's just some match that I'm missing that reflects this. He had some high profile players such as Neo, the old Roy main from Melee, Mikeniko, the other Mike, who likes to yell with pride, and weirdly enough, the PPMD, who actually did pretty decent with the guy. Marth really always just stayed around the top for most of the meta, even when the others were rising up ahead of him. Another character who managed to do the same was the hype guy that started it all for Brawl, Snake.
Being a newcomer to Brawl, along with being the first third-party character added to the game, Snake has been an anticipated character by the team since Super Smash Bros. Melee due to Kojima's wanting to add Solid Snake to the series. And although he wouldn't be added to Melee, he would be revealed at Brawl's E3 2006 trailer as the main third-party character, well until the other guy was revealed way later. Now being one of the first characters in Brawl's early creation, it would not come as a surprise to you that this character may have gotten some numerous changes throughout development, and also may have had some special privileges due to his third-party label. First off, his model. Like, damn, you can see the bulge in his pants, and there it is. But just keep a reminder in your head about his model size, and then tell me why his up tilt is like that. Well, for reasons possibly known or unknown, Snake has some of the best disjointed attacks for his size, with up tilt being a particular notoriety. He also possesses 3 forms of projectiles, his grenades, Nikata, and C4, which allows him to wall off opponents very easily. Add that with a vertical mortar launcher for an up smash and a ground mine for a down smash, which can stay there up until Snake loses the stock, and you have a character that covers literally every option available at ledge. Just to add salt to the wound, his forward smash, although one of the largest ones to release, is a semi-large explosive hitbox that can burst shields at full charge and cover a roll option if the opponent tries to roll from all given ledge traps. It's not practical besides that given scenario, but I just wanted to mention it anyways. He also possesses 2 aerial attacks, with 2 of them having meteor properties, and 2 of them having strong kill power both horizontally and vertically. He also has pretty high survivability, tied with his unreasonably huge weight, his heavy fast fall speed, and his great momentum cancelling off of just air dodge alone. He has some good throws off grab, with his down throw being the best in the game due to its ability to work as a setup for tech chase scenarios, which force the opponent putting down is very limiting. And its approach game is pretty good when using dash attack cancel up smash, or DACus for short, which allows him to chain his dash attack into his motor up smash within a pretty decent percentage gap on a lot of characters. Damn, Snake sounds like a pretty damn good character. So why the hell is he only in top 6? Well, for a long time, while he was believed to be a pretty solidified top 2 character, with some of the very early days even considering him better than Meta Knight, he would stick with his label until the 6th tier list in 2011, when he would drop in 3rd after G-Nest and ADHD's strongest payoffs with Diddy Kong. Soon, with some characters becoming more prominent in the meta, Snake would drop down all the way to 6th on the most recent tier list, his lowest yet. This was most likely out of his weaker attributes being taken advantage of a lot more over time, such as his very linear recovery options, even with the C4, his weak ground to air transition, as he has the slowest jump squat in the game, a heavy fall speed when in the air, and a poor jump height. No, this is not his short hop I'm showing you. This is his full press ground jump, and his sluggish mobility on the ground whenever he's unable to perform DACuses and in the air, which he has the slowest air acceleration in the game. Also, as said a few seconds earlier, some characters were just used more in the meta when their true potential was finally discovered, whereas Snake didn't have much to go on beyond when he has been discovered the years prior. In spite of this, he was actually the 2nd most commonly used character throughout all of Brawl's Nationals tournaments, and he still had a very strong player base behind him to the very end, including Japanese player Shogun, American player MVD, and Northern American player Ally. These are just the notable ones, however. Snake wasn't the only one who has crowned with a very high potential before stumbling somewhat below, as Falco is another case of such a repeating example.
The bird's back, ready to fly into battle, and this time he's more fit for the occasion than last time. Falco's more regulated on his great moves rather than his attributes, as although he possesses good defense moves such as a large shield and a quick spot dodge, and has great vertical momentum, which can allow him to do some follow-up strings and a much better chance of recovering, his ground and air speed, especially horizontally, leaves a lot to be desired. He also lost quite a few KO output moves in his kit, especially after receiving nerfs on moves like up tilt, down tilt, and neutral air in a transition from melee to brawl. Although he does have some forms of strings he can follow through on, a lot of his combos starting moves are just rendered too strong to actually follow up most of the time, especially given the game's hit-stun cancel mechanic. One of his moves, his reflector, is no longer attached to his body and sends the opponent semi-upwards instead. He tosses it forward in sort of a casual manner and only gives a bit of a pushback against approaching opponents, removing it like any combo potential whatsoever. But I guess it makes a decent get off me move, I think. In spite of these negative attributes and design choices, some of these moves that make Falco work, like he has one of the best chain grabbing mix-ups in the whole game, allowing him to deal like repeatedly awesome damage and re-grab, and when wanting to finish chain grab, it can either lead into sweet spot down area near the ledge or perform a DACus, given its own unique name called the Gatling combo, which is a pretty difficult DACus to perform, but the payoff is immense. His chain grab is also one of the easiest to perform consistently across the board of characters, including on Meta Knight. He possesses many great aerials, all of which can auto cancel on landing except for forward air, but no one uses forward air, so it doesn't matter. But back air and down air in particular maintain their speed and power from melee, even with a few nerfs to some parts of the moves. I mentioned earlier that his reflector is semi-decent get off me too, but what it does it infinitely better is his blaster, since it comes out very fast now and is extremely long range, which can lock some characters in inescapable stun animation. It has transcendent property, which gives him more of a camping option this time. This also can be done repeatedly due to like its fast spawning nature tied with Brawl's floatier physics and lack of landing lag attached to the move. It's almost like they intentionally designed on keeping melee Falco's blaster in this game and trying to fix everything around it to work the same as same way it had been done earlier. If your get off me tool isn't working and you start succumbing to the pressure, then why don't you just dash away from the pain? Falco's Phantasm in this game is just overall superior version than its melee counterpart. It's a much better recovery option since it travels farther horizontally and has less lag overall, making it harder to predict or punish. It's a good escape option when being pressured, and it has some weird properties similar to that of Mach Tornado, which means most moves cannot beat or clash against it. Falco is probably the highest ranking character that is only good in a meta of a few defined moves. Okay, no, that's a lie because Ice Climbers. But he's respected with respect. He's like the highest with respect to his character. This can also be seen with his position in the meta, always being a very high ranking character throughout most of the game's competitive lifespan, with players like Keitaro, DEHF, or as people know as Larry Lur, FK92, and Masha from Japan. All these improvements, however, do not compare to the best buff of this character it has received in Smash, which is giving him a Boston accent. Even though Falco suffered a drop on the tier list over time, he did manage to stay in the realms of A tier territory. The same could not be said for the famed electric Pokemon.
Okay, listen. I get that his overall character traits allow him to remain a pretty useful character against a lot of characters. But this is 3 games in a row that Pikachu is a high or semi-high tier character. Like, what the fuck is this? I thought the Kirby bias was futile, but apparently this fat rat keeps managing to squeam his way through as his usual self every goddamn time. Anyways, Pikachu has a variety of decent tools to use against most of the cast. He has some good disjointed attacks like his forward smash and up aerial, though both of those were already pretty good in melee. He has an electric projectile that bounces in an arc and lasts a long while, snuffing out a lot of characters' approaches. His recovery is probably one of the best in the game, as he not only has a move that covers purely horizontal with a high knockback angle if it hits anyone trying to intercept it, but an up special that can go in any direction he desires twice. Well, the second quick attack can only go in any direction 38 degrees over the first quick speed angle, but most of his moves are tied with the electric effect, which although multiplies hit lag and therefore making it harder to SDI, it can also make them drop shield in the middle of any multi-hit moves if they tried to go for a punish. For any of the one-hit electric moves, it usually means to signify that your ass is getting launched right across the stage. Pikachu has a chain grab off either forward throw or down throw depending on the size and build of a character, in which case can either lead to an aerial or hit off up smash, or be a setup to a possible thunder hit. In fact, he actually has a very favorable matchup against Fox, a character only 6 spaces away from him on the tier list just because of this specific setup. Honestly, Pikachu has a lot of weird matchups for a semi-high tier. He has semi-favorable matchups against Snake and Falco, he has a very favorable matchup against Sheik, and also may possibly, but very unlikely believably, have an even matchup against Meta Knight. However, he also goes even with Peach and Kirby, characters much lower on the tier list, and he has a slight disadvantage when fighting Lucario for some odd reason. Most of these odd yet significant matchups may be under the probable cause of ESAM. You see, ESAM was really the only player out there that actually got results with Pikachu in Brawl, though he wasn't like the main reason why Pikachu got out of mid-tier or anything, but Pikachu has always been seen as a pretty high tier from the start. He's most likely the reason why Pikachu has maintained a semi-high tier position since he made a lot of groundbreaking discoveries with Pikachu, the most notable of which include quick attack canceling, which is essentially an infinite hit stun lock that can lead to an easy punish, and doing a B reverse wave bouncing thunder technique. It sounds like a mouthful, but it's a good way to wall off opponents wanting to recover from ledge. So yeah, as much as he is a bald-headed soy boy, you do gotta give the man credit for keeping Pikachu a thing in the later Brawl meta. Even without these techniques, Pikachu is just an overall good character. He's small but has some chub to his weight, and he's got a lot of good buffs in the transition to Brawl. He's also a bit faster in the air, making aerial pressure somewhat more significant to his playstyle. He does have some range problems still, especially with his tilts. And of course, although he's small, he's a pretty chubby character, so it's not like he'll be able to pancake through attacks. Also, it's not like ESAM was the only person to get results with the Pocket Monster, as in the early days, Anther and Ninja Link had achieved some pretty good results with him, and in post-mortem Brawl times, Gunner Maniac has done pretty good in tournaments to still throw on Brawl brackets. In Japan though, he wasn't all that popular of a character. The only notable player at the time was Renai, who co-made Pikachu with Meta Knight. So, yeah, sucks to suck in your own home place, Pika Butt.
Samus, who is a character accessed through pressing L and R over Samus' slot. Man, weren't those just weird times? It's generally regarded as a million times better than her suit itself. Unlike her suited version, she possesses a great juggle game through her low lag aerials, all of which, besides down aerial, have good knockback scaling. Her down throw follow-ups having fast mobility through her attributes and attack speed, including crazy movement options due to her versatile air mobility, agile jumps, and fast frame data on a lot of these moves. She has pretty good recovery options, though one is a bit weaker than the others and has an effective spacing tool with her paralyzer projectiles and plasma whip. Also, she just starts off with the armor pieces every time when starting a match, so yeah. She's pretty good. Just like with Pikachu, a lot of her moves are touched up with the electric effect, which means a lot of her moves have multiplied hit lag. However, unlike with Pikachu, where most of his electric attacks are also like put him into hit lag along with the opponent, Zero Suit Samus can act while her opponents are stuck in a hit lag. I suppose it has to do something with her gun being treated as a different property from the character, but this unique treatment essentially allows her to combo any move from a paralyzed shot or down smash, including her dash attack, down tilt, a space forward smash, any aerial of her choice, a grab, her side special, a footstool, even another down smash can be followed up with, and at higher percentage, characters can be followed up with a down smash to up smash combo. Ain't that quacking crazy? Even without those moves, she still has other great electric moves in her kit, including an up special that, while it's a tether-like recovery, leaving her vulnerable if the ledge is already grabbed, also has a unique property that forces her opponents to come down, making it not only a threat to those trying to edge guard her, but also a good anti-air tool against air camping characters, and also a much better tether recovery since it can also be done repeatedly instead of putting her into helpless states like most others. She also has a similar tether-like move, but this time it's horizontal. Her side special, which is a pretty laggy move, has extreme knockback at the tip of the move. Her final special will mention flip jump through sending her at a weird arc and leaving her vulnerable against shielding opponents. It's not only a good recovery move for some horizontal distance and a vertical boost while keeping away from edgeguarding foes, it also acts as a good mix-up against nearby opponents and even has a dedicated attack option if you decide to punish a tricked opponent. Not only that, but this move specific in this game gives her intangibility beginning on frame 1. Yeah, Zero Suit Samus is definitely one that requires critical thinking to try and challenge. Even when you're playing as the top of the tops, her flaws are rather mediocre ground attacks. Having weak options out of shield and having one of the worst grabs in the game, though the payoff for landing it will likely net you some damage points against your opponent, best out of down throw specifically. She also has a below average matchup charts for the characters above her, as she is only seen as slightly advantageous against ICs, and having even matches against Mars and Snake. Some of her matches are pretty questionable, even with Sonic, Peach, right? Though even with these knockbacks, she still performs extremely well at the top level, as shown with Kamimushi, Nick Riddle, and later Salim, who would be one of the most notable players by defeating multiple professional players and winning the tournament solo Zero Suit Samus at Apex 2013, which was one of his first majors he attended. This caused an extreme jump from potential upper mid tier to high tier impossible top tier. Unfortunately, her late game development, we wouldn't see the full potential of what years of research and technical progress would have done for her character throughout the Brawl run. Although it wouldn't have mattered anyways, because she would have been good in the next game. You want to know who wouldn't have been good in the next game? That's right, it's Wario.
Damn, Wario really just opened his Heimer. Wario is a man of agility, a man who has accomplished great feats beyond what any subpar human could do with their maximum capabilities. Wario is a man of prestige. He holds value to what only he deems worth it. Wario is a man of nature, where he does not hold back his genetic flaws in order to succeed in a world of odds, many of which are against him. Wario's genetic build may be one of the most unique of any characters so far. for he is fat, heavy, and thick all around. But he's also somewhat comically short and is unnaturally floaty for his build. In fact, his airspeed is just barely lower than that of Jigglypuff's, and this along with his great aerial game and similar deadly punish moves have often led him to be dubbed Fat Puff. These traits allow him to survive a lot longer, and also not suffer from being combo food or forced to stay in the air and try and circumvent possible punishes. His forward aerial is helpful while of pain against opponents off stage, and his up aerial may be one of the worst moves to try and deal with as a heavy character stuck in the air, or one with weak air acceleration. Outside of his air game, he's got pretty good moves all around, such as his down tilt, the Cockroach Crusher. Okay, Wario's got some funny ass names for his moves. Like Pig's Foot Kick for his forward air, Grab Poke Poke for his pummel, Heavy Buttocks for back throw? Like why? Who made these names? Anyways, getting back on topic. His down tilt is decently ranged and comes out fast, though it's pretty slow when finishing up. He has a huge dacus due to the way his hitbox is when using up smash, along with the distance covered when performed, thus making it one of his better approach options when on the ground. His other smash attack, the Go, starts up very fast, gives him a slight momentum boost ahead, and grants him armor even before his hitbox comes out. It's also really good at just killing too, but don't expect to see this be landed a lot. His throws don't have much to them except down throw, which has chain grabbing potential, and his forward and back throws being reversed in the game for some strange reason. He has no doubt a pretty good special set, which should be expected from a man like Wario. His chomp is essentially a grab without the whole timing thing. So many players get caught in this thing expecting it not to catch the roll or spot dodge. Now there isn't much outside of edgeguard setups to use this move, and there isn't any form of healing properly tied to it, so if you land it, make sure to mash the shit out of your controller. Each of those bites are gonna matter. He has a bike which can be helpful for ground control, but really is much better not because of the bike itself, but the bike wheels. See, when Wario's bike breaks, his wheels will be left afterwards, giving Wario a much better projectile option compared to just chucking the bike. With the wheels, Wario can do some insane shit when tied to his aerial game. His down special is also just one of the best in the game. It has a much shorter duration charge to get to full waft, and an even shorter charge if wanting to reach half waft. Half waft in particular is notable for being ball-bustingly fast and dealing with crazy knockback even at mid-level percentages, and also gives him a semi-decent rise when done. So what would be the reason to use full waft? Well, outside of the extreme vertical rise you get from it, the only other things I could find is that it deals very high base damage. Okay, fair. And it also gives him super armor up until the rise. However, given how indisputably fast half waft is, there really is no fair trade-off. Of course, however, if your opponent is a decent percentage, you can still use full waft in hopes for a kill, and if not, well, at least your opponent is now in a disadvantaged position. His recovery is pretty good too if he has a bike and a decently charged bot. If he doesn't, then his only option is this weird-ass up special called Corkscrew. That's a funny name, and can be easily punished. So yeah, this is where we start getting to the downsides of Wario. Yes, even a perfect man like Wario must suffer flaws, as all men must in their life in order to become perfect thereon. Although he possesses some good ground moves, he also has some very mediocre ones. Up tilt is fine if you manage to land it, but it's pretty slow finishing up. His dash attack kinda sucks, even with his fast startup. His edge attacks are nothing to write home about, and he even has one of the worst fucking down smashes I've ever seen in this game. How the hell did this get past the balancing team? Also doesn't help that a lot of his attacks are very stubby in range, so some characters like Marth, Snake, and of course Meta Knight can all space effectively from him. Probably his worst downside is his animation when grab release. For some reason, Brawl, and only Brawl characters released out of their grab animations can sometimes be put into their aerial animation longer than their grab opponent's releasing animation, which gives their opponent a good advantage into punishing them. And the way Wario is released, tied with the very little air movement given to those grab release in the air, makes him very easy to punish or get re-grabbed, almost infinitely by some characters. Although he does have good results in the meta, and has players like Reflex, Fiction, Abadongo, and False that play good with him, he was actually considered much better in doubles. So much so, the only other character team that would beat a doubles Wario was a Meta Knight and Wario team. Some other prominent players like Ally and Nikat picked up Wario solely for the doubles bracket, with False and Nikat having one of the best and most consistent team performances in all of Brawl's meta. And of course, this reflects on Wario very well, for a man cannot suffice to succeed on his own without the aid of their own self-created doppelganger, the mind. Now, everyone below here until D tier are essentially normal or even below average character, with one huge gimmick or advantage that carries them to higher mid tier. So there won't be much to write about for some of these guys, but we'll try and cover what we can. Now, time for the C+ tier starter, Lucario.
Honestly, Lucario is probably the closest representation of the Dragon Ball fighters we'll see in a Smash game. Most of his attacks involve some form of his supernatural aura, a sort of gimmick tied to his character that allows him to grow even more powerful the worse his condition is, like being at a really high percentage or being a stock down from the opponent, sort of like a comeback mechanic, and also helps him avoid suffering from knockback stealing, a common issue with most of the cast members. He's heavily reliant on good neutral position that can grant him a variety of movement or approach options that will lead to his opponent receiving a flurry of attack follow-ups or combos. Keyword would, since this is Brawl we're talking about, but still, he has a much more fighting game design than most of the other characters. Plus, he's also just very anime for someone of his character. I mean, light streaks, super explosive attacks from the palms of his hands, and the weird fucking bandana skin around his eyes. I mean, I think that's good at least. And just the overall posture he does when performing moves. This dude definitely has an entire wall dedicated to his whole anime collection. Aura is really good in this game. I mean, it's really good. Given that Smash Ball tournaments often run at 3 stocks, this gives a good advantage for Lucario in a disadvantaged spot, since it gives him the ample time to try and make good punishes off of any mistakes made by their opponent and quickly round down to the opponents to where they are. He also has a few specials that are tied to his aura, making them stronger or weaker depending on the state that he's in. This includes his Aura Sphere, which is quite literally a buff Mewtwo Shadow Ball, and Force Palm, which can be devastating even at mid-level percentages. If Aura is really that strong at the moment, it's almost like taking a 12 gauge shotgun at point blank range. He also possesses a decent recovery with the fast moving extreme speed, and also can wall jump. He also retains good survivability, especially with down air and forward air being momentum cancelling moves. However, extreme speed is pretty predictable and can even leave Lucario being locked into an immovable freefall state if grabbed during it. I think one of the bigger issues with Lucario is that he has to be in a disadvantageous state to really shine, which has risk factors tied to it, and he's also susceptible to chain grabs. Otherwise, he's pretty balanced overall, but he does particularly better in doubles, especially since stocks are tied to his gameplay. If Lucario has low stocks, while his teammate has high stocks, that means Lucario can dish out heavy damage and attacks against team opponents. And if the Lucario dies, well, he can just share another stock from his teammate. This team combo was pretty popular, even getting its own name as the Anubis combo, with its most popular iteration being Mewtwo King and Trela, both of whom will win in a variety of double tournaments using the team combo. Of course, as stated before, Lucario did good in singles too, with players like Azin and Junebug in the early days of Brawl, and Reggie and Trela coming in with good results in the later years of Brawl's lifespan, especially the most notable one being Trela taking a set off Mewtwo King as Skaitar. Of course, Lucario may be pretty overall balanced character, but our next challenger will break the traditional rule very easily. I mean, hey, what do you expect from the king?
King Dedede has arrived to Super Smash Bros. As a third representative of the Kirby series. Now, for any Smashers out there who have only gained knowledge of Brawl through Reddit shitposting and Twitter threads, you may be asking yourself, how is this heavy-ass penguin considered a high mid-tier? Don't all the heavy characters suck in this game? And to that I say, shut your fucking mouth! And also, you have no idea how this big blub separates himself from the weaklings to the buff schizoids of the Brawl meta. Catch them! King Dedede has a unique status for a super heavyweight character. He has strong pressure tools despite being a slow character, with the smash attacks taking out good portions of an opponent's shield health, being good KO options, though up tilt does do the same but with a quicker startup, and having a very long disjointed range on his forward and down tilt. He is a good edge guarder in spite of being the slowest character in the air. He also has a good fast fall speed which can trick out a lot of opponents trying to mix up their recoveries, and has 5 jumps, which can lead him to safely recovering from a failed fast fall aerial attempt. He has a good forward air, which helps him with covering his whole front view and hits damn hard. He has a long-lasting neutral air, which can be useful for string setups on stage when hitting with the weaker hitbox, and has a very disjointed back aerial that can rival Melee Jigglypuff's back aerial, even leading to the same wall of pain scenarios against a lot of the cast. His recovery game is also great for a big-ass penguin. As I mentioned before, he has 4 mid-air jumps, but he also has an up special that can go extremely high and has decent horizontal movement if positioned as such, while also granting him super armor up until the end of his apex height. It also has a helpful landing hitbox that can KO unsuspecting opponents at high percent and Meteor Smash any opponent into the air trying to challenge the move, although it is worth noting that it can pass through ledges unless he cancels the move and enters freefall. However, his strongest attributes are his defense and what he can do out of defense. First to note is that King Dedede's shield is big, covers every inch of his body at peak shield size, which helps him avoid being poked. Furthermore, his spot dodge is unintentionally the best in the entire game. Although it looks pretty normal, with a 19 frame intangibility window against a 7 frame vulnerable window, he actually shifts much further back into the Z-axis. In fact, he shifts so far back into the Z-axis, most attacks will straight up whiff even when his animation is almost finished. The only spot that can be attacked during this animation are ones that are low enough to hit his foot, and even then, you'd still have to hit when his intangibility frames are inactive. When punishing an opponent pressuring your shield, you have two good options. Spot dodge, as mentioned before, or grab them. And this is where King Dedede slowly shifts into becoming a heavy melee Marth. Grab is also good to go for out of shield regardless of how hard your shield was hit or how fast your opponent could react, because A. Dedede's grab comes out pretty fast, and B. King Dedede has one of the largest non-tether grabs in the game. Seriously, just look at it. This is the type of shit that only melee grabs could have gotten away with. Not only is his grab great, but his throws are too. Now, up throw is kinda iffy. It's only useful when pushing your opponents upwards to try to lead into an aerial if they're caught lagging. But for back and forward throw, these are really good for sending opponents off stage, with his forward throw being a particularly good finisher when wrapping up his down throw chain grabs. Oh yeah, if you thought melee had bullshit chain grabs, Brawl Dedede would single-handedly destroy all their chain grabs before chain grabbing them into oblivion. Every character that is weight higher than light gets straight up nullified if pushed into a wall, and some bigger characters are straight up nullified off grab alone. Not even following up with dash grabs, I mean literally getting infinite off of standing grab. Some characters, like Bowser, have an unwinnable matchup against Dedede just cause of this damn grab, and others, like the Plumbers, Samus, Donkey Kong, and even Wolf, get shut down hard because of this stupid little grab. Hell, he even holds positive matchup against the two characters above him, because even if chain grabs aren't ideal for your match, you can still nullify some characters' existence by just letting go of them. So with long, disjointed tools, a good edge guarding game, high survival rate, and possessing some of the best out-of-shield options in the game, why isn't this Emperor crowned the House of Top Tier? Well, simply put, he's still a big man, which means he can eat shit by much longer range moves, and trust me, a lot of these guys at the top have quite a lot of long range moves. Also, with Meta Knight being a deciding force in the meta, he in particular gets shut down just from being forced into a match with him, whereas some of the other high plays characters might fare better, or at least last a much longer fight against Meta Knight than what the King could do. Also, characters with decent projectile tools that are also fast can easily outpace or outcamp him, which is why Olimar, Falco, and Fox are good counter picks against Dedede. Despite this, the King is still at a good position, although it's unlike his early rankings where he was literally a top 3 ranked character in the meta. Where the good times have gone. He was represented well in the meta, and is still used as a pocket character for many low to mid tier matchups, with players like Atomsk, Big D, Vex Khusrani, Seabrick, and I almost died hearing this part, Coney. Hell, even Hungrybox played King Dedede on the rare occasions he played Brawl in tournaments. Although he may not be the king of the throne, he's at least got his buddy by his side to take care of that for him. Fuck, I wouldn't be surprised if there's some collusion going on between the two. I mean, come on, what are the odds that the King's Apprentice would be up on the throne with the king kinda just following in the shadows? I felt like I've heard this story somewhere in history before.
You know, every time Sakurai tries to make Link viable, it just doesn't work. In Smash 64, Link may be the disputed worst character in the game, with only Luigi being the other contender to that role. In Melee, Link had some stuff going for him, but otherwise was still just not a viable character. Then they decided to make him younger and a lot faster as a justification to add another character to the game, and although this Link did have some highlighted matchups that made him stand out from his older time-altering self, it still just wasn't enough for him to be considered a viable character. Finally, after years of frustration and non-stop commitment, Sakurai had finally created the viable Link we've all been waiting for. Well, actually it was the one made during the last 6 months of development. The one that actually took through all of development? Yeah, no, try waiting a decade before getting that chance. Toon Link makes his big debut in Super Smash Bros. Brawl, supposedly replacing Young Link, even though Young Link wasn't really planned to make a return, so... yeah. Anyways, Toon Link, in spite of his ugly-ass cel-shaded details for this sort of game's art style, is actually a pretty good zoner and has some decent range output given his size. For one, he's a small-sized character with sword range, putting him on par with Meta Knight. Do not confuse that sentence to mean that he plays like or beats Meta Knight, but Toon Link can zone well and land setups on Meta Knight to at least give himself some space. What I mean more by that sentence is that those traits often give those characters pretty heavy privilege in the meta. If you have these traits, you're likely to be at least a mid-tier at lowest. He's very fast, much faster than his alternate counterpart, and he's designed around the floaty physics of Brawl, which makes his recovery very good. His airspeed is good, which allows him to follow up on aerials and can keep opponents in the air through juggling with his aerials, up throw, and up tilt. His up air is actually pretty good putting pressure on platforms from below, and his other aerials are nothing to scoff at, especially back air, which comes out fast, ends fast, and covers a wide range behind him, and down air, a risky stall and fall move but can hit with a devastating meteor smash and can even hit Meta Knight out of his Mach Tornado if aligned properly, though an even better option to challenge that move is his bombs. Bombs aren't the destroyer of Machnado, but tied with his good jump and air mobility, Toon Link can land more bombs from the top, which can force the Meta Knight to stop going for dumb decisions over and over again. His bombs do take a fewy to actually pull out, but the moment he has a bomb in his hand is when you have to be careful, because a good landed bomb will lead you to either getting grabbed or getting slammed by Nair or Bear. Even if he doesn't land a bomb, he can still use it as a means of keeping opponents on the ground through platform hopping, which is especially helpful in matchups like Ice Climbers and Falco, where a grab will likely mean the end of your stock. Like I said, Toon Link has a lot of good projectile options which can help him camp around if needed and force his opponents to approach, though not always, like Arrow, Boomerang, and Bomb. I mentioned before his up tilt is good for juggling, but another good ground move of his is up smash. Usually the Lynx would have 3 swings on their up smash, leading to a lot of SDI pullouts and thus an easy punish. Toon Link only swings once, and it hits pretty good. He also has a decent down smash that can semi-spike opponents, but it isn't all that strong. His forward tilt is of course about the same outside the lack of raw power, and his down tilt is helpful for edge guarding the ledge and can even trip on occasion. Now his recovery is quite tasty. His up special goes up really high and covers some good horizontal distance if leaning that way. It's also a bit decent out of shield option, though I wouldn't call it the best. It is a bit hard to SDI out of simply because of the fact that the opponent gets sent around the spin instead of just getting hit on one side like most flashy hitbox moves. He has again bombs that can help him in any given scenario when recovering, and he also has a decent tether recovery. So overall, all of this along with his decent rise from double jumping, I'd say he makes his recovery pretty good if not a bit predictable. Really, the only big problems I could figure out is that he's light so he can get killed early, and his grab being a tether suffers from bad end lag if it fails to catch an opponent. However, its aerial version automatically cancels when landing, so you can use it as a poke tool. Otherwise, I'd say that Toon Link is probably the most balanced zoner character in pretty much all of Smash. He can't get too reliant on his projectiles and outright avoid fighting, yet he can use those same projectiles in order to help him in neutral or lead into potential follow-ups, which can lead into strings or a turn in advantageous state. He also has good range and recovery for his size, but nothing too crazy as to nullify almost the entire cast from even trying. In banned Meta Knight tournaments, he often performs with better results and is a more favored counter pick if Meta Knight isn't allowed, since he does have similar traits in terms of game design around the physics and versatile options in their available kits. Players like MJG, Jash, Southpaw, and Hyuga all played well with the character, and he did have a pretty strong matchup chart overall. It makes me wonder if Toon Link would have been a high tier if Meta Knight wasn't in the game, or at least if Meta Knight was internationally banned and sanctioned. Ah well, no point in trying to imagine a dream scenario at this point in. Ain't that right, Wolf? Wolf?
So can this part be considered like the mid-tier section of the tier list? I mean, it's right down the middle, and just like other mid-tiers, they just barely scrape the results needed to be considered barely viable. Ah well, who cares? We're talking about the new Hound Wolf. Wolf wasn't really supposed to be added in. Originally, only Fox and Falcon was supposed to be the final lineup as the Star Fox representatives. However, when Brawl got delayed for the 3rd pepperoni on the pizza, the devs team decided to add an elected new representative, that being Wolf.
Yeah, suck it, bitch!
Due to his late addition, Wolf has had some odd traits incomparable to the rest of the cast. His airspeed is leagues above both Fox and Falco, being tied with Wario of all characters. Some of his moves have crazy freeze frames, which can force a lot of players to accidentally drop their shields too early and get punished for it. His blaster laser has full transcendent priority, and the gun itself has a small hitbox attached to it. His reflector not only grants him 1 frame of intangibility for his entire body, but extends it up to 9 frames. Of course with having a hitbox too. One other odd trait Wolf has, at least compared to his Species counterpart, is an extremely effective momentum canceling capability, as he can live to much higher percentages than Fox and Falco in almost every regard. Tie that with a quick and throwing recovery tool with his side special Wolf Flash, and it's probably the best in your favor to leave this fellow alone when off stage. Another extremely odd trait is that Wolf actually has the longest meteor cancel window in all of Brawl, and if you don't know what that is, well, to run it down, meteor canceling is a technique that allows you to cancel out a move's launch and knockback by either jumping or using your up special, usually out of moves that cover at a meteor angle, or as most people know them as spikes, though this term is subjected differently between all the Smash games. Meteor canceling only exists in Melee and Brawl, most likely as a response to the dumbass insta-kill meteor angles in Smash 64. In Melee, meteors could be cancelled after 8 frames of hitstun lag and can be done regardless of what hitstun state you're in. However, not all moves are covered by this, as this window could only work on moves that covered a specific angle. Some moves, most notably Falco's down air, barely slips away from the covered angle required to do a meteor smash, which gave terms to moves that were essentially meteors but not cancelable spikes. Moving to Brawl, a much wider window was established, so most of the moves involving this angle, usually down aerials, will allow any opponent to meteor cancel, usually at 25 frames. I say most of it usually with an asterisk because there are some exceptional qualifiers that don't make it universal. 1. There are some very specific moves that can keep a horizontal launching downward angle and thus can be meteor cancelled. And 2. Though the game states it has a 25 frame window, it can arguably be a 15 frame window input wise, since at the 15th frame you can buffer a jump, and since buffers are a 10 frame advantage, that means if done well, you can easily get a jump the moment the cancel window activates off a buffer. Tap jump can also beat around the meteor cancel window by just holding up, which will automatically make you jump once the cancel window activates with no penalty, whereas in Melee, you always had to land it right on or after frame 8 window in order for it to cancel, or you suffer a 40 frame penalty. Also, the frame window isn't universal on some characters. Most get a 25 frame window, however, some of you can get a shorter or longer frame windows. Characters like Charizard, Meta Knight, and Pit both have a 30 to 32 frame windows, most likely because of their ability to glide. While Ivysaur, Olimar, Zerasu, Samus have a 15 frame window, most likely because of their reliance on a tether like recovery. Wolf, on the other hand, has 60 frames before the meteor cancel can be activated. He doesn't glide, and his recovery is decent, but nothing too long. So I'm assuming that this was an oversight they forgot to fix in development, but the point still stands that recovering is a lot more difficult for Wolf than it should be. This means that he's extremely susceptible to even low knockback meteor smashes, which is also why his matchup against Falco is absolutely fucking awful. He's essentially stuck in a bad camping match he can't compete well in, and the moment he's grabbed, he's completely fucked, since he'll just be grabbed and grabbed and grabbed until he reaches near the ledge, only to take a clean down aerial to the face. Damn. What a fucking horrendous thing to even look at. Even I'm feeling pretty pissy about this. Oh yeah, Wolf is also susceptible to chain grabs, especially to the more notorious chain grabbers in the game. Since he's heavier than the other species and has fast gravity pushing against him, he is easily chain grabbed by the notorious BCGs, and as a result, has particularly bad matchups against King DDD, Wario, and Pikachu. However, with his fast airspeed, favorable projectile given its size and hitbox, and some good range on his attacks, especially his cracked back aerial, he does manage some decent matchups, including even ones against Ice Climbers, Marth, and Zerasu Samus, along with only a slight disadvantage matchup against Meta Knight. Wolf had a promising beginnings in the early meta, with players like Choice and JJ Wolf showing potential with the character. However, for a small period of time, Wolf lost a lot of significant player base and as a result, stumbled into the 20s range of his placements, until both MLG Columbus 2010, where Kane will receive a placement of 49th, and MLG DC 2010, where Seagull Joe will receive a placement of 33rd, both of which would help Wolf rise steadily in the meta as the post-2010 Brawl meta progressed, but ultimately not having much commitment to keep him rising upwards and afterwards. Unfortunately for Wolf, he didn't realize he'd be sitting side by side with his main foe, Fox McCloud. Flying into the battlefield. Well, maybe not literally flying, but flying his way into the battlefield. Fox in Brawl had undergone a huge surgery procedure that leaves him About the same. Okay, that's a bit of an overstatement. The man went through huge changes in the transition from Melee to Brawl, but still ended up in a better spot than most of the other veterans, I can definitely say that. Fox had lost most of his oomph as he no longer had strings of combos and overall versatile aerial kit, or a crazy ground game with Shine galore. He does still have a lot of good killing options, especially with buff moves like down smash and back aerial. Even with a nerfed up smash and up aerial, they are still strong enough to reliably kill around 100 to 130%. He has many different traits that change up his playstyle, with better air mobility along with shorter landing life for all of his aerials, lower gravity that's still the highest in the game, and a heavier weight. This makes him a menace when fighting in the air, though nothing like his melee counterpart, and it grants him a much stronger recovery game. However, he is more susceptible to a few specific chain grabs and locks because of it. One thing that the Brawl engine did help Fox in is the way that he uses his tools to an even better extent than melee. As with the overall floaty physics of the game, Fox can now consistently shoot double lasers with precise timing in between shots. 3 lasers. You can also stall in the air with the use of his reflector. Oh. I guess this is the part we talk about this move, eh? Fox's reflector is not the same melee killer as it once was, but it was probably one of the most compensated moves during their transitional development. They didn't want to be like Shine in Melee, but they still wanted to be good like Shine in Melee, if you get what I'm trying to say with this. Basically, Shine has a lot of the same traits as it would in Melee, but not enough to warrant it the same way, as it can be dropped as fast as it could be jump cancelled out of, making it very spammable and safer on projectile reflection. It not only still starts up on frame 1 with complete intangibility, but extends up until frame 4, also at the same time you can drop the reflector, with Fox's end light being the only thing between it from being a complete intangible stall tool. Speaking of stalling, due to the move's floaty status in the air and the very spammable nature of it, you can stall for a long time in the air, making it harder for a character to either punish you either at a risk of whiffing or getting hit by a much sharper shine spike angle. Now this sounds all cool, sick, and fast, but the removal of wave dashing, the inability to jump out of shine, even with the closely designed nature of having a similar capability, and the fact that the hitbox isn't active until frame 3 and sends at a slightly higher angle, makes it not the same combo starter, ender, or killer as it was in Melee, but the perks it was granted still allows it to be used in some matches. Either way, Fox is more notable for his aerial prowess in this game than his capabilities on the ground, so you're going to be seeing Foxes jumping around swinging their C-sticks mid-air for a lot of the game, only really sticking onto the ground for forcing an approach through blaster, or to go for a potential kill much earlier with his smash attacks. Fox in particular is a well-studied character. He has some pretty decent matchups against most of the top tiers, even if it is him either going even or being countered by said characters. But he also has a few horrible matchups against a few characters, even ones lower than him due to his heavy gravity and weight. Pikachu is notably ugly because of an easy to perform 0 to death chain grab on the poor spacing. Overall, he has stayed an average character through the meta, not only dipping too far down, nor reaching too high up, but for now he has a pretty favorable position due to the likes of players like Nakat for a brief time, TKD, Travante, Trump, also known as Triple T's, and Yui. Yui is a pretty notable player as he's taken several sets over top Japanese players in his region, which is likely why Fox is viewed more favorable in Japan, being 7th on their tier list. Regardless, Fox is a character with decent viability performance, but is most likely reserved as a pocket pick for many upper tier players. Wait, hold on, I'm getting some breaking news from Jenny. Let's get on the field and see what Jenny has to tell us.
Flatworld has brought an announcement to Smash World. After some tweaks and pressing, the Gamer of Watches has returned with a flatter design and paper-thin gameplay. Mr. Game & Watch is quite an anomaly. The guy is almost perplexing in the way he was designed. He feels right for this game. His design and attributes fit right in with the physics engine, and he's gone through so many changes when transitioning into Brawl from Melee, and yet he's only a mid-tier character. Let's talk about the simple-minded maniac. Mr. Game & Watch plays in tandem with Brawl's design, much more defensively than offensively, and it works well for his character. Floaty, not only because of the physics, but also from the air mobility and gravity, status of a lightweight that packs a punch, real defense options, and better in the air than on the ground. Although he has a fast fall speed, it doesn't affect him that much since he's often too late to combo, though not as light as his melee counterpart, giving him better survivability. And he has decent airspeed and acceleration. Several of his moves are still as hard-hitting as they were in Melee, especially since they have not only gotten better damage increases, but also range increases. He was given a sizable shield for his character and a good air dodge and spot dodge that leaves him more intangible than invulnerable. Finally, as compensation, likely for not having the ability to L-cancel in Melee, Mr. Game & Watch has a much shorter lag on all of his aerials, both end lag and landing lag. Some of his aerials have been tweaked to follow up more, and some have been completely retooled to help with his kit better. Well, that's kind of subjective, honestly. Would you rather have a pepperoni-sized hitbox that kills at 80 on average, or a chain and drag down move that can possibly connect to other stronger aerials or specials? Speaking of specials, outside of Judge being mostly the same, most of his specials have gotten some tweaks that either help alleviate or diminish Mr. Game Game & Watch's playstyle. Fire no longer puts Game & Watch into helplessness, meaning he can act out of the move with any other move outside of fire. And not only that, but he has attacks on parachute to help slow his descent and have a more improved mobility when descending from his fall. It is missing the pepperoni hitbox. In fact, nothing with fire has a hitbox except for Mr. Game & Watch's Rise, which is very pitiful. The firemen also have win boxes that do make them helpful as a get off shield option, but you'd also be setting yourself up by throwing yourself high in the air. This definitely helps improve his recovery game much more, and also allows him to survive depths not even accomplished in Melee, even with that game's already high launch distance. But that's not the only thing helping Game & Watch survive. Oil Panic had received a variety of buffs in Brawl, one of the biggest being that it has power in its aerial version, which in Melee it only did 1% with no knockback. Another few buffs include the absorption radius in the bucket, which essentially makes it impossible for projectiles to hit him either from his front or his back, and the momentum gained when sliding off edges, giving it a little bit of utility through edge momentum shifting. However, Oil Panic is used best when it's not used for its intended purpose. One thing you might notice in some of these clips is that when used in the air, Mr. Game & Watch almost seems to completely stop moving. Why is that? Well, simply put, Oil Panic has a unique attribute tied to the move, that when used unfulfilled will halt all of Mr. Game & Watch's momentum to 0. This trait is shared amongst other Brawl characters as momentum cancelling, and even though all characters can do it to some extent, Mr. Game & Watch often holds Contender as having one of the best momentum cancelling options, especially for his weight class. The 60% difference done when using it with DI mixed in. And even without DI, you can extend your survivability by about 33% from just momentum cancelling alone. Of course, you can't whip it out immediately since it's coded as a special which can interrupt hits done, but you can get it out faster than usual via performing an aerial first, best choice being a neutral aerial, and then following up immediately with a bucket halt, made even better with its frame 1 activation. With a lot of other contentious momentum cancelers not having this property, learning this is essentially a requirement for Game & Watch mains, and without it he'd probably not be in the position he is now. The only other special left to mention is Chef, which acts about the same in Melee, not heavily used but can be helpful in some edge guarding scenarios. However, it did nerf his chance of having better survivability since in Melee, Chef could be used in mid-air to cancel his vertical momentum. This ability does not return, making Game & Watch survivability much more reliant on being sent horizontally rather than vertically. So just watch out for up smashes. Man, Mr. Game & Watch actually seems like a competent character to use, with great defense options, a good air game, much better ground reaching moves, and survivability never seen before in a lightweight character. Is there truly anything negative about Mr. Game & Watch? Well, a few small things. Since the addition of hit send cancelling removes any form of combos, this makes Game & Watch have next to nothing in forms of combos. Even with his near lagless moves like up tilt and neutral air, they're really dependent on where the opponent is going to SDI or DI in order to keep following and have strict windows to reach before the opponent has a chance to jump or air dodge. Also, his many good ground attacks either have increased startup lag or end lag, unless you're up tilt because you get no lag. Also, that grab game he had in Melee, yeah, that's gone. All of his throws are pretty pathetic besides down throw and sort of up throw. With up throw, you can kind of play the 50-50 game early in a match, but it's not as effective past very low percent, so your most reliable throw is down throw, which can lead into a tech chase on all the cast and spike down opponents past ledge. Also, in spite of his overall better survivability through momentum cancelling, that's only really good when launched horizontally. His vertical momentum cancelling is very weak, and only saves him by a small percent difference. Simply put, Mr. Game & Watch doesn't struggle because of any sort of nerfs or glaring flaws in his kit. Rather, it's simply the environment of the meta that causes him to struggle against much of the top tiers, such as them having better approach options, faster movement, and frequent usage of chain grabs that just make him a much more considerable pick over Mr. Game & Watch. Which is why Game & Watch dropped off over time from being a potential top 5 character to a more common, maybe, but not certain upper mid-tier character. Regardless, he's always had a player base behind him for most of the meta. Players like UTD Zach bringing him results during the pre-MLG era, Nikakatsu, TV, and Vinny in between the post-MLG and pre-2012 era, and more recently Alphakins, whenever he's not stuck in Quick Syrup in the post-2012 era. Mr. Game & Watch acts less like a secret hidden pocket character waiting to whip out the big guns against the top tiers, and more like a gatekeeper between the high and mid tiers, with my explanation being backed up by this totally not outdated decade-old matchup chart. Now, how about we move on to another retro character? Yeah, we got a lineup of retros to look forward to, so just stick around a bit more when we next look at Pit.
Okay, listen, I know that Pit hasn't seen the light of day for over a decade and a half, but damn, His design really sticks out compared to most of the others. You could tell this kid was meant for the more stylized anime design, which honestly turned out better for this kid because he later got a new characters game 4 years later which Sakurai made with the 3DS. But that's neither here nor back then. Pit is fast, all in the air and light. I think I'm starting to notice a bit of a pattern here. He has relatively fast and safe moves, especially his aerials. He's difficult to chain grab due to his lightweight and low gravity, though this does make him easier to kill, decreasing his chance of surviving straight from an attack, as he also doesn't have any good momentum canceling options. His recovery game is absolutely insane, as not only does he have multiple jumps, but also the ability to glide, and his up special being the Wings of Icarus, which, although a pitifully low rise, is one of the longest lasting recoveries in the game and can make him rise from the depths of hell all the way back to the heavens. However, it's worth to note that due to this low rise, it's easy to punish since he has no hitbox with it, and if he tries to whip out an aerial against you, can't ride in any sort of way again until he touches the ground floor. Also, if he's hit, he can't use the move again until he touches the ground, so always make sure to edge guard this when you can. It's all benefits for you. Wings of Icarus can be used for wing dashing, which is like a wave dash, but done with the startup of Pit's up special into either moving left or right, and then into a buffered down aerial, which gives them a little bit of a microspacing option. He also has good defense options with a good sized shield, a fast spot dodge, and 2 specials with unique properties. Angel Ring, his side special, which can reflect projectiles and also works as a short bust option for any close range foes, and has an annoying ass sound effect every fucking time he does it. And Mirror Shield, his down special, which not only reflects projectiles but gives Pit armor during setup and acts like a reverse move when whipping out the shield, in a similar vein to Mario's Cape. Oh, and we can't forget his neutral special, the Polarity bow, which lets him shoot a very fast and very long arrow up to 4 times in any of 3 directions, and gives him the ability to curve it downwards or upwards, making it a good tool for edge guarding opponents. Other than that, most of his hitboxes are pretty easy SDI out of. Many of his ground and aerial attacks either do minimum damage and knockback or require a subset of knockback growth to kill way later. And in a game that has the strongest amount of stale move negation tied to knockback, this makes some moves that are designed to have KO potential only to be that when fresh. The only move that has a frequent kill power and damage is back aerial, which is one of the strongest in the whole game, but only when sweet spotted, with the sour spot being stupidly weak. So it's not that it can be done repeatedly in the hopes of landing it unlike some other characters like Wolf or King Dedede. Now in America, Pit didn't have much reputation to him. Carflix, KY Des, and Kool-Aid had gotten some pretty decent placements, but ultimately in America, he never really got any kind of reputation in the meta outside of being a pocket character with a few select matchups. I think the reason why he has a rather decent placing on the tier list is most likely out of influence from the Japanese meta. Players like Masashi, Earth, and Mayo all main the Angel, and all of which have gotten great results in their nation with Pit, which is the sole reason why he's considered a high tier in their part of the meta. Otherwise, I can't see any other reason besides just being ranked as having better matchups than those below him. Meh, I don't want to dwell on this guy much longer. If you want a better Brawl Pit, just play pre 3.5 Project M.
Holy shit, you thought the earlier guys were so retro? Be amazed when they bring back the only character that had never been playable in a fucking video game. Okay, well, originally so until Mario Kart DS, but it's not like you're controlling the character, you're controlling the cart now, so come on. Rob the Robot, a character designed as a toy accessory for the Nintendo Entertainment System, becomes a fighter in Super Smash Bros. Brawl, which would make him the first toy product to be added to the Smash series. Rob is somewhat of a projectile ranger archetype. He's a big guy with decent mobility on the ground and in the air, but also falls like he's made of pure plastic. He needs to keep foes from a distance in order to not hit sour spots or blind spots on his moves, which gives him a similar playstyle akin to Marth, but also has a variety of projectiles at his leisure, all of which have different properties and utilities, leaning towards a more projectile-lenient playstyle, closer to that of Diddy Kong or Zero Suit Samus for more of an electric comparison. His aerials and smash attacks are often laggy in general, but hit really hard, at least until the stale move negation kicks in, which can be a detriment for moves like down smash, up smash, and up air. Many of his non-KO moves are designed with less lag overall, but compensate with either having shorter range or having moderate knockback, which makes it very hard to combo beyond lower percents or hard reads. Down tilt is the exception to this, with good range and very little lag, making it spammy, thereby making it a good damage racker, having the possibility to trip opponents and being good for pushing opponents off ledge or as an intimidating edge guard. Two of his best aerials, down air and back air, both have wide range, produce a burn effect, and send at some hard to recover angles, but also force Rob to stall in place even before the hitbox comes out, making it tricky to land properly. Neutral Aerial is also a contender for being one of the best of its kind in Brawl, as the move's hitboxes are pretty large, surrounds him as he spins, and has a very generous auto-cancel window, and has KO potential, but is hampered by stale move negation. All of his throws outside of forward throw have solid uses, back throw being a reliable kill throw near edge at around high percents, while also working in tandem as a setup for edge guarding. Up throw, which also has reliable kill throw at high percents even earlier when done on a platform, and down throw, which can either lead into up air at very early percents or work as a 50-50 around mid percents. Finally, his specials are... well, some of his specials are shit other characters wish they had, and some others are... let's go by best of the best, which is 2 projectile specials, Robo Beam and Gyro. Robo Beam is a laser projectile Rob can beam out of his eyes, pressing the B button only. The size and strength is dependent on how long it's charged, the 22nd being the maximum strength, size, and length of the Robo Beam. One unique property of Robo Beam a lot of energy projectiles don't have is the ability to ricochet out floors, walls, and ceilings when angled. This can allow for some good mind games against the opponent above you or when trying to recover. When it comes to Gyro, the move can also similarly be charged, though manually, and is launched forward, though not at the same length or range as Robo Beam. But Gyro has the unique property of not only having an active hitbox when it has hit someone, but also being able to be reused continuously, which can help lead into small form combos if the move is used before charging to its limit, or being a good conditioner at pressuring opponents, especially those that require more close-range combat, or those at high percents recovering back to stage. Gyro is also helpful for glide tossing. Since Rob has a good length roll and Gyro has a heavy knockback for a light projectile, this makes approaching a more professional Rob a treacherous action to do, especially at high percentages. As for his up special, Robo Burner is not as bad per se, since even if you interrupt the up special with an attack to protect yourself, you don't get put into a helpless state, or are unable to reuse any part of the move you have left. And plus it does cover good distance, even horizontally. But this recovery is pretty slow rising and can also be debated pretty easily by faking attacking or keeping the Rob at bay and then grabbing the ledge. Side special is probably the least used move of his. It's super easy to SDI out of, isn't all that strong in the first place, doesn't need to be used for recovering since his Robo Burner already does that well, and is pretty pathetic even with the ability to reflect projectiles since the spin comes out later than most reflective moves, and you're leaving yourself wide open if the opponent dodges the reflect. So yeah, with Rob, he has a lot of positives and negatives, with his positives usually helping out dealing with characters either lower than him on the tier list, or those who have a hard time challenging his pseudo-zoner playstyle. But with his below average ground mobility, big hurtbox, and having a moveset that's on the weaker side overall, he simply can't put up much of a challenge against those higher than him on the tier list, especially characters like Meta Knight, Olimar, and Falco who can easily outrange and camp against him, and others like DDD and Ice Climbers who can easily land a grab on him and either force him into a disadvantaged state or erase his stock. So for the most part, he's usually useful as a pocket character against mostly anyone thinking they'll do well with a low tier in a tournament. However, since these flaws aren't noticeable right away, he was actually considered a top 6 character in the game. It was ultimately the prominence of his weakness becoming more revealing, along with the rise of Meta Knight, who was Rob's absolute worst matchup in the game, that led to him slouching to mid-tier level. Regardless, Rob has a player base around him, with people like 8-Bit Man, Tommy, Ocean, and Kiraflex, you again? Oh, and also founder of Clash Tournaments and director of Smash Ultimate Pro Guide's website, Tia. Of course, nobody can forget to mention one of the greatest Rob players of the early meta. CPU, a young prodigy who went to EVO to challenge some of the best smashers of their time, where he would not only win first of the entire tournament, but also destroy Ken, the then considered king of Smash, with his pro-casual skill levels nothing the world had ever seen before. It was so embarrassing for Ken that he would end up retiring from ever trying Super Smash Bros. Brawl again, instead spending time in Gabon, where he would also get mercilessly destroyed.
Oh, now it's looking like Survivor all over again. Looking like Survivor. I voted him out.
Such a shame that we don't have standards like this anymore. I guess that's just how the Smash community works. First they drive away the kids, then they drive away the women. Speaking of women. Well, if it isn't the bait and switch bitch. In Super Smash Bros. Melee, Princess Peach was a near-certified top-tier character who had amazing prowess, strength, and damage, especially with her down smash. Had a pretty damn good recovery even with the limited rise of Parasol, her up special, and had one of the best projectiles in the game, completely RNG, but would make for good uses such as pressure tools or combo starters, and enders tied with her unique X-Factor flute, which had a myriad of different uses in her neutral, advantageous, or recovery game. In Brawl, Peach is actually kind of the same, just more nerfed. Meaning she had the original game plan for melee tied to her, but you're gonna have to really work for it. She has the means to rack up damage like crazy when her opponent is at low percentages through moves like down aerial, neutral aerial, and any common turnip tosses. But most moves that used to do that more efficiently, like down smash, have been completely refined so that stuff like this doesn't happen to any single character, whether that be for better or for worse. A lot of her situational moves, like her neutral special, up aerial, up tilt, and down tilt, still end up as such with very little buff or nerfs to them. Her vegetable pool ratings have seen some increases on a few of the items she can grab, giving her better odds at getting a more deadly item. And many of her turnips have gotten damage increases across the board, but her turnips cannot be recycled if it hits a shield, and her toss length is much shorter than how it was in melee. She still maintains heavy usage of floating as a means of recovering and approaching, but the removal of lagless float cancel aerials and double jump cancel impairs her mix-up options and combo potential when flowing with floating, and the shortening of her double jump height makes recovering a slight nuisance. Okay, maybe not, given that every character has magnet hands in comparison to melee, where she had to find a means to sweet spot onto the ledge before any sort of hitbox came in contact with her, but still nerfs on her recovery regardless. Peach doesn't have a faster ground game in comparison to melee, and with a decent roll length, she can glide tosses as means of approaching, but she's still among one of the slowest in the cast, and she had traded her airspeed in favor for better air acceleration. Really for Peach, she plays about how she does in melee, but requires more spacing to properly punish. React in time at a more cumbersome pace in order to rack damage that a lot of her moves in melee could have done much more quickly without getting caught by her opponents and hit hard, and maintain dominance in the air in a game in which a lot of characters she's fighting against are also very floaty, and often have better aerials to challenge against hers. She has a high learning curve as she also did for melee, which in turn makes her a hard character for a lot of competitors to pick up. However, she still had more representation and results in the meta than Pit did, which should say something about this tier list, but hey. Live with what you gotta live with. As usual, she has better shots dealing with characters below her rather than above her. In fact, she has a pretty notoriously bad matchup with Meta Knight, Snake, and oddly enough Lucario, but has a slightly favorable matchup against the Ice Climbers. I guess some things just never change. Nicole, now known as Pinkman, Dark.Pch, and SlayerZ have all rep Peach in the North American Brawl meta, with Japan having Kie in order to bring some diversity to the table. And although in the post-Brawl meta she has very little representatives outside of that one guy that can kick your ass at your local, it wouldn't surprise me if some sort of armada came into town and showed what's up with this character. There are a lot of advanced techniques for her character that have never been used properly in tournament, or weren't noted until Brawl was already underground, but who knows? It may be an empty lot right now, but we'll just have to wait and see every SmashCon. Damn, this game is never getting another shot. Alright, moving on from that, this is the part of the tier where we start seeing characters with more flaws than positive attributes. So bear that in mind when we discuss going forward. Dear T Onward starts with our favorite ball of elastic, Kirby.
By the way, did you know that all the characters in D tier can be sung to Mambo number 5? Don't believe me? Well... a little bit of Kirby in my life, a little bit of Donkey Kong by my side, a little bit of Sonic's all I need, a little bit of Ike's what I see, a little bit of Sheik in the sun, a little bit Ness all night long, a little bit of Yoshi, here I am, a little bit of you makes me your man. Wow, that was god-awful. Anyways, Kirby has received numerous buffs in the transition from Melee to Brawl, which was definitely needed considering he was amongst one of the worst characters in the entire game. His biggest buff overall is the game's physics engine being a complete overhaul compared to Melee's physics. The floatier nature of the game just helps him fit in more naturally compared to many others, and thereby making his development probably one of significant ease. Even though he's still slow in the air, he is actually a bit faster than before. In fact, he's top 5 in terms of air acceleration, whereas before he was also top 5, but with slower airspeed and less cast members. I know this might sound crazy to some, but Kirby's airspeed is actually faster than Meta Knight's. Kirby's ground game is a bit more sluggish, even with a bad traction nerf to him, but as with most of the other floaty characters in the game, the air is his home, though I wouldn't say to a huge extent as in the case of Meta Knight or Peach. More so like in the case of Wario. A lot of his ground moves and specials have increased range, better hitbox properties, and even KO potential, which is especially good given Melee Kirby's forward smash was the only smash attack that had some consistency with killing opponents. They even got rid of his crappy dash attack with this cooler one, which... actually might be worse, honestly. Like, Melee's dash attack was pretty bad, but it had the unique property of rolling off platforms and ledges and was also a one-hit move. This new one does deal good damage, but the hitboxes are all small and it's a multi-hit, so it's very easy for the opponent to fall out even if they aren't SDIing. Some of Kirby's specials are actually pretty central to his playstyle. Hammer, for one, is a much better move than it was in Melee. As though it now has shorter reach to it, the move's sweet spot is not only much larger, but takes priority over the sour spot, and it kills hella early. Not only that, but the aerial version of this move may honestly be the best move in Kirby's kit, since unlike most other aerial renditions of a special, this one doesn't put Kirby into freefall and it retains a similar amount of damage and knockback to that of its grounded counterpart. So just hope you don't get smacked by this move when trying to recover. The other special of his is Inhale, which there isn't anything particularly notable to mention outside of an increased range on the vacuum and the ability to B-reverse the move, but when its usage is combined with Kirby's much more floatier nature, it becomes apparent that the move is very helpful as a ledge trap option. If you have ever played in a serious tournament and lost the stock to a Kirby, be prepared to deal with Kirby's camp plan, consisting of ledge, re-grab ledge, air dodge, and inhale or forward aerial. Also, Kirby in this game actually has combos to fish for from his grab game, which has been improved overall. First to note is that all of his grabs have gotten increased range and less lag, and his pummel is much faster at the cost of less damage, but its faster mashing rate makes it a better damage racker than before. His forward and back throws lose that stupid suicide option that was really only a Kirby suicide, with buffs, like back throw's helpfulness to set up scenarios for edge guarding, and forward throw being a combo starter into his neutral air, up air, or jab, which can also lead into a re-grab if cancelled. Others like up throw see benefits more on stages with platforms, since it gives the move much higher KO potential off early percents. Down throw is the only move that can be arguably seen as a nerf, since it lost its tech chain grabbing capability but also deals much more damage and can be comboed with his ground attacks at very early percents. The only part of Kirby's moveset that saw more nerfs than buffs was his aerial kit, which ultimately does him more harm than good since he is generally designed as a more air-friendly character. Even his best aerial in the game, back air, still saw nerfs in the transition from Melee to Brawl. Although he receives some amount of compensation on a lot of his landing lag aerials, they aren't fully compensated to the level that L-canceling did, and a lot of his aerials had actually gained more lag during the ending animations of each move. And in a game where it seems that the air is the home environment for a lot of the top tiers, this makes it tougher for Kirby to challenge them, since his approach options are often outranged or if reacted too quickly, can be sufficiently punished by much faster, more powerful moves. And since Kirby is a lightweight with a lot of round to his build, these much faster, more powerful moves can end up knocking the poor fella out of the arena. Hell, even with his far-reaching and gracious recovery, he is still challenged often, even with the spike knife to try and help spare him of his fate. Overall, Kirby has had his placings through Brawl's meta. He doesn't fare well against some of the top tiers, but can go even with quite a few high and mid-tier characters, especially given his advantageous lightweight factor that makes him ungrabbable against most chain grabs, and his aerial prowess in matchups against any ground-heavy opponents. Cheetah is the only Smash player who had really pushed the character to new grounds during the meta's existence, even with his campy playstyle, but there had been others like Fallen and YBM in the early meta, who had gotten decent results at stacked Brawl majors, and later on Mike Kirby before he heard what a Splatoon was. Man, it's weird knowing that Splatoon started off on the Wii U. I don't think most Splatoon players knew about this title. They probably thought 2 was the first release in North America, and the first one was some Japanese exclusive or something. Sorry, losing track of the topic at hand. Up next is Diddy's older brother, or cousin, or uncle, or nephew? It's Donkey Kong, there.
Donkey Kong comes in after rolling in the midsection for 2 games in a row. Let's see if he'll place better. Wow, this guy can't catch a break. 3 games of being a pure mid-tier through and through. Really makes you wonder. However, like with the 2 games before, DK has to have some point in the meta where he stands out, such as being the only character with a chain grab in Smash 64, which sees him use a lot in tournaments against characters with poor get-off-me tools. In Melee, a recent resurgence of Donkey Kong players has gone underway in what's known as the Kong Renaissance, ever since the release of Slippy Online. Along with some of DK's hidden potential being put to good use, and the advancement of his agility and movement, making him a more formidable threat than before to many out of the top 10 players. In Brawl, Donkey Kong at one point did have a somewhat more consistent role in the early meta, arguably between 2008 and late 2009. This was when a lot of people still didn't grasp the main gameplay of Brawl. Air camping wasn't an outright tactic done through a match, only basic level chain grabs had been discovered, and the stage list was a lot more liberal than how it is now. He was 10th place on the tier list as a high tier, even higher than his relative Diddy. Now though, he's down to 21. Solid mid tier, as Donkey Kong should always be under Sakurai's vision. But how? How does DK always end up on the weaker end in this series? Well, first and foremost, all of the stuff mentioned earlier was in its infancy. So when all those started advancing, Donkey Kong started declining. Second off, Donkey Kong is heavy. I mean, he's a gorilla. You can't really take any weight off of a gorilla, unless you take its organs and muscles out. But even then, the skin probably still weighs like high double digits. What I'm trying to get across is that Donkey Kong is very easy to chain grab, which gives him some notoriously bad matchups against characters like Ice Climbers and King Dedede. Dedede is especially bad since DK is one of the only 3 characters that can be truly grabbed infinitely without having to avoid stealing the throw's launch with a pummel. Also, due to his large size, this also just makes him easier to hit, and with a lot of top and high tiers having disjointed hitboxes on their moves, yeah, it's a bitch game for DK. Also, a lot of good things he had in Melee were removed in Brawl, and I don't just mean in terms of the physics or techniques he had. For example, his back aerial and up aerial had crazy early auto cancels, allowing them to be followed up much more quickly in Melee. In Brawl, these auto cancel windows were pushed much later into the animation, and with the removal of L canceling, there's no way to get around this lag increase. Another move that has played a heavy role in his kit was up throw off of his cargo throw. This was a move that had crazy setup potential into chaining aerial combos or as a mean to finish off the opponent. But in Brawl, the launch it sends at is just not feasible for a consistent follow-up. Maybe 50-50 on some characters, but not a follow-up, which just hurts his KO capabilities since this was a move that Donkey Kong players often went for, since it was essentially a guaranteed each and every time. Donkey Kong also lost a good out-of-shield option in the form of grounded spinning Kong, which had lost its frame 3 intangibility, frame 3 initial hitbox with great power, and second hitbox that helped in part of covering both sides when popping out of shield. So now, outside of its use as the Invincicopter, grounded spinning Kong is completely useless in this game. Donkey Kong, however, does have quite a few attributes that most heavyweights wish they had to the same level. Agility, speed, range, and survivability, which is not to be confused with recovery, because yeah, it's still pretty weak in this game. But compared to how it was in Smash 64 and Melee, it's definitely a step up for a character like him. His frame data and a lot of his grounded moves have been updated to allow for faster performance and less chances of being punished. Even his down special is usable in this game, providing that you're not using it as a means to combo into other moves or to grab airborne opponents, but instead as a move that is best used below platforms in order to start tech chase scenarios on said platforms. And his grab game, though nerfing its absolute best setup, does allow for Donkey Kong to have multiple means of sending an opponent away to reset neutral, throwing them in a way that will lead you to succeeding off a failed reaction, or forcing them into a disadvantage, or just used straight up as a kill option. Hell, he may have lost one form of chain grab, but he gained another off of his grab release, and this one's much easier to perform. For speed, he is unusually fast for a super heavyweight character, as most other super heavyweights in this game are designed with the slow speed, strong power mentality that a lot of fighting games are often plagued with, and Smash was no exception. Well, one exception. That one being Donkey Kong. He has much better speed on the ground and in the air, and has a particularly lighter gravity on him that allows him to perform much more aerials off stage without the risk of him diving too far down from ledge. And with the change to a lot of his frame data, when Donkey Kong can finally come in with an approach, it can be a scary experience. For range, Donkey Kong has gotten a lot of increased hitbox sizes, extended lengths, and positions on said hitboxes, and many property changes on a few hitboxes that can give DK the upper hand, like intangibility on his arm, which allows him to beat moves like Mach Tornado, having hitboxes cover hurtboxes in the same moves where it originally wasn't like that, or having chances to trip the opponent, leaving them in a vulnerable state if so. Finally, his survivability is much better through his increased weight between the two games, the changes to the physics engine that allow for it, the knockback staling that heavily favors heavier characters if the move is even remotely staled, and the biggest one being his ability to momentum cancel with his aerial spinning Kong. Granted, The move does force Donkey Kong into a free fall, which is why some consider Mr. Game & Watch's bucket to be the best momentum canceling move in the game. But don't let that consequence take a piss on this move. It completely negates all momentum on frame 1, grants DK intangibility on his arms through most of the move, gives him great horizontal mobility both during and after the move is finished, and it's immune to any pushback effect done by some character specials. Also, the differences between no DI and no momentum cancel to that of DI with momentum cancel is absolutely absurd. Donkey Kong is a fucking tank in this game, but ultimately, much like a tank, the moment someone does something to break it, it all falls apart. Which is why Donkey Kong isn't as high as he was once before. Come on. At least learn from your own game, dude. Now for a mid-tier of this position, Donkey Kong did actually achieve quite good tournament results, and had a steady player base with smashers like Bum, who would actually try to pick up Brawl Donkey Kong over Melee Donkey Kong, and had gotten wins over top players during the early Brawl meta. Ook, Ripple, DK Will, and then following up with DK Bill, the Canadian version of DK Will, who still actually plays to this day. Looking at the matchup chart, it's still pretty clear that DK is more utilized in the low tier matchups, though it's worth mentioning that he does hold even matchups with characters like Marth and Lucario, since he actually has much greater range and disjoints on his moves compared to them. Yes, even compared to Marth's longer than Brawl sword, and I think Ike's too? Don't quote me on that. The weird thing about this matchup chart though, is that Donkey Kong does actually have 2 hard countered matchups, but weirdly enough, it's not Meta Knight or Ice Climbers, but instead King Dedede and Olimar. King Dedede I can understand, cause le funny chain grab. But shouldn't that same rank be put for Ice Climbers too? Same concept, same execution, just different placings. Also, Olimar is just weird. I get it's a projectile versus range type of bullshit, but you're telling me Falco and Snake are much easier matchups for Donkey Kong on average? God, LuigiLito, you should've just fucking waited until the next chart came along. Bum ass fuckwad. Next is Sonic, I'm outta here.
Sonic the Hedgehog. One of the greatest and most attractive characters ever thought of.
Okay, I'm just fucking with ya. We're not going to be diving into that hot water issue. In fact, we're not even going to dive into any hot water because unlike in any other iteration after, Sonic and Brawl is kind of ass. Okay, so maybe I'm partly telling the truth. In competitive play, he is still irrelevant on outrunning the opponent and forcing him to approach or interact against you a lot of the time. In fact, most of the sets used in this video were follow the basic 3 stock 7 or 8 minute timer, always seem to end off in 2 minutes or less. So yes, Sonic is still one campy son of a bitch in this game. So why wasn't he a top 5 character then? Well, simply put, his speed is the only real advantage he has in this game, and having one huge advantage in one section of a character's overall design does not automatically place him into a higher tier. Just go talk to Bowser about that. For one, Sonic may have the best ground speed, but in the air, he's only got a great airspeed. Okay, still pretty good, but airspeed is the only good for leaning on your max air movement while drifting. What we're looking for is for air acceleration, which is the speed at which a character can easily switch between left and right while moving in the air and how quick it takes to reach their top airspeed, and as we can see, it's not looking good for Sonic at all. So, although Sonic can reach his top airspeed pretty fast, he cannot shuffle well in the air. Also, Sonic's move speed is fucking trash! If you want a better explanation, just search and watch this video.
Spin dash, but it goes up. What? It's spin dash, yes.
In all seriousness, a lot of his moves simply don't work as finishers, and the few that do are either short range, laggy in animation, or only work a few times before knockback sailing weakens it gradually. He oftentimes has to get close to his opponent to fight against him, which is something very speedy characters don't do except if it's done as a means to surprise them, which actually he kinda does okay considering a lot of his moves are pretty samey, so it becomes hard to know what exact move he's performing. But still, a lot of these speedy moves don't have a lot of KO power in them, and are easily punished if blocked or cleaned with. He also has no form of projectiles in his moveset outside of the spring when performing up special, which is only helpful in edge guarding opponents, since if done up off or above ground. The opponent can not only shield but also reuse, allowing them to effectively chase Sonic. His specials are probably the only good moves in his moveset, although none of them are meant to be KO moves. They are meant to be good cross-up and escape moves. His up special grants him good vertical height and also doesn't put him into freefall, allowing him to retaliate against any close foes. His Ninja special is a homing attack that allows him to quickly attack nearby foes regardless of the condition he and his foes are in. His side and down special are different when performing in action, but look very similar visually, which like I said before, plays with his unpredictable nature against opponents. Not only that, both moves give him a quick burst option, which can allow him to pass through some projectiles, can help decently cancel any momentum, and both allow for horizontal movement in the air, though both with trade-offs, where Spin Charge doesn't grant him a lighter drop when moving horizontally in comparison with his Spin Dash, which does. It does grant him more KO power in the air when releasing and moving forward, whereas Spin Dash is relatively weak in the air, especially made so since it's a multi-hit attack, being easy to SDI out of. Spin Dash can also be shield cancelled at any point in the move, whereas Spin Dash can only be shield cancelled when landing after an aerial charge. He also possesses some of the greatest taunts ever, and I don't think any other taunt in the series has been played with more people's minds than Sonic and Brawl. Seriously, imagine getting your ass beat. No, imagine you die off the side with some cheesy ass kill that isn't even like a good read or anything from a Sonic player, and he just hits you with the "You're too slow." I would honestly probably be sitting in front of a judge from the actions I would commit upon hearing and seeing that stupid ass taunt. Although with a lot of weaknesses that makes his matchup much more difficult, one thing Sonic had, and his biggest X factor, was his extremely dedicated player base, because of course, why wouldn't Sonic have an extremely dedicated player base? So to put a bit of background into this before we get started, when the game was released, Sonic was immediately casted into the bottom tier of early Brawl. His flaws were pretty obvious to a lot of players, and as said before, camping wasn't pushed to its absolute limits unlike way later in Brawl's meta. But the Sonic player base, they did not take this kindly. They promised that their beloved Hedgehog would rain down on all the top tiers. They promised that their Speedy Gonzalez would place high at tournaments. They promised their character would rise. Players like Speed, Shugo, and at least before the Switch, SB and X would start off with good results throughout 2009, leading the character to see a trailblaze a positive rise throughout the year. However, it wouldn't be until late 2010 where Sonic mains would see the best performances done by their character. The MLG 2010 series saw a national circuit done for Smash Bros. Brawl that saw some of the most entrants for Brawl tournaments in many locations that represented regions in the US, such as Colorado for the Gulf region, Columbus for the Rust Belt region, Raleigh for the Southeast region, DC for the MD/VA region, and Dallas for the Midwest and Southern region, with Dallas being the big blowout tournament for Brawl. Though two of the best players at that time, Mewtwo and ADHD, were banned from this due to earlier bracket manipulation, there were still many top Brawl players coming here to prove themselves as the best, such as Janess, Ali, Isam, Atomisk, Rich Brown, and Tyrant. This was not going to be an easy bracket for any low tier mains to get through though. Well, that's what everyone had thought, until both SB and X played their absolute heart out with solo Sonic, both reaching as high as 5th and 6th place respectively. These high performances made many in the community realize that Sonic wasn't some slash mouth that, if played correctly and given the advantage, can force you to play a long drawn game that no one except the Sonic mains are willing to deal with. And though Sonic would never see placing these again, he did manage to keep a relatively good player base even beyond the post-Brawl meta. And also, his tier position would rise after this tournament and would never change ever again. This was truly the peak for Brawl Sonic, and probably a few good things to come out of Sonic's fan base. Essentially, Sonic is a character who has to land hits first before playing to camp away, which is a lot harder in this game since there's a lot of top tiers either have tools that force them to keep away or have camping capabilities essentially designed into their character. Whether intentional or not, that ultimately served better and much safer than even Sonic's campy playstyle. But once he's given the advantage or head start, then prepare for either a wrangling game of cat and mouse or a film consisting of pure idle animations. Still, his weaknesses are much more strongly nosed and more effective in harming Sonic than in the other games, which is likely why he never saw a top 10 or even top 20 position. Well, not every blue hair maniac gets to see the right light. Isn't that right, Ike? Ike from Fire Emblem Path of Radiance makes his debut in Super Smash Bros. Brawl as the new coming representative for this Fire Emblem series after Roy died in his own meta. Now, unlike with Roy, Ike is his own character and simply not a clone of Marth. For one, his sword is not just long, but it's also fucking huge. Like my not like Cloud huge, but just look at his sword compared to Marth's. It's like a kitchen knife to a pin needle. 2, it has power to it, which I mean shouldn't be unpredictable. It's a huge fucking sword. Forward tilt, up tilt, down tilt on ledge, every one of his smash attacks, as well as the back aerial, up aerial, and the good charge neutral special can all reliably kill at around or lower than 100%. And even with steel move, negation, weakening, knockback over time, the percentage gap isn't too wide to rule them out of KO viability. He also boasts some good recovery potential for a fighter of his weight and strength, being a purely vertical up special and purely horizontal side special. The up special actually can bring down any off-screen opponents for a suicide kill, and it alleviates any ledge pressure if thrown at the right time. But it's also the only move in the entire game with a ledge grab limit. Man, if only this limit it was implemented universally. The side special, meanwhile, has to be charged to move farther, though uncharged still goes a pretty good distance forward, and has a pretty strong hitbox that can actually come out at any point of the move outside of the end leg, which outside of the move putting him into helpless when used in midair is probably the worst part about this move, because it is insanely easy to punish if shielded or even spot dodged. And that's the biggest problem with Ike. He's just too slow, and I don't mean in terms of mobility, though that sector also isn't perfect by any means, but his moves are just generally laggy as hell and get him very easily punished, though he does have a few fast moves in terms of startup, like forward tilt and uncharged quick draw, and his fastest move overall, jab, is probably one of the best jabs in the game, as not only does the full set lead to a strong swing that can KO opponents at high percentage, but the first jab has such a long range for a jab and it ends so quickly that you can not only tech lock down opponents, but also jab cancel multiple times, easily racking up damage and allowing you to finish up with other moves like finishing jab or up tilt. Other than that, all of his moves are slow on startup, ending, or even both. Hell, even his non-kill moves like forward aerial and neutral aerial are still slow in some regard, especially when building up for the swing. Simply put though, Ike is a ranged fighter by heart. He has no means of a projectile whatsoever and doesn't have any way to repel them back outside of counter, which is only effective if within close range of the opponent, which a can't-be projectile opponent isn't going to let that happen. That means at least half of the top tiers already shut him down, and the other half can reliably punish him with chain grabs or simply outcamp him in their own ways. He is somewhat slow and heavy after all. Despite this though, he does actually have an even matchup with Snake despite being the most heavy-based projectile character in Brawl, and also holds an even matchup with the Ice Climbers. But then again, Nana is an AI, and he could probably get fucked up when hit once. Now, Ike had two labels needed to him throughout the meta, a new character by the higher ranked players, and a new killer by the more amateur and casual player base. The former being that Ike's players often relied on their opponent's errors to land them hard KOs on them, like predicting rolls or punishing which moves when they were already ready to attack, which I guess is often a noobish thing to do. I don't know, it actually sounds more like a skill issue, honestly. And the latter being that amateur players and casual players would often get their asses blasted to the blast zone due to his sheer power and strength that most of them can't counter properly. This led Ike kind of in this global state where the former believed that he was a likely bottom tier character that only helps to keep gate casuals from entering competitive play, and the latter believing that the pure strengths help carry him even compared to the other heavy strong bottom tiers, and that someone simply needed to play him with a heavy defense mentality over C-stick smashing. And we would never kind of see that in the community. I say kind of because these guys aren't getting like top 5 or even top 8 with the characters at majors and shit, but they were high enough placing to get people to reconsider whether Ike was really a bottom tier character or just a low mid tier character. Kirk, Ryo, Mr. Doom's SDI sucks, and Sans all got good placings through the Brawl meta with Ike. But it was Sans' 9th placing at Apex 2010, a Brawl major that also allowed Meta Knight, that really shows that this character has some substance of viability to him, even if it wasn't much. After this event, Ike did rise, but mostly stayed in bottom tier and low mid from there on. Meanwhile, our next character had never really had a prominent rise or fall, just kind of floating in the same spot from beginning to end.
Let's bring some context into this. In Super Smash Bros. Melee, Sheik was a top tier character who had a formidable punish game that can be easily started off of her down throw, which helped lead into many combo chains, deadly finishers at higher percents, and could even chain grab at least half the cast. Very few could properly punish out of it, and the few that could did not have it guaranteed. Her fast speed across the ground and when converting to the air made follow-ups much less of a hassle trying to connect, and also gives her a more quick reaction when dealing with tech chases. Not only that, but many of her combo starting attacks and aerials all have very fast frame data and generous hitboxes with great reach for a character of her size. She did have a few weaknesses, such as having a very pathetic recovery that, although had an explosive hitbox when disappearing, was still of short length and also gave her bad landing lag if she happened to land right on stage. She also has a bit of a problem trying to punish more lightweight or floaty characters in neutral. Ultimately though, Sheik in Melee is a very flexible character between all skill levels in this game, and that flexibility can be seen up to today, where throughout all of Melee's history, she had never once dropped out of top or high tier. Back then, however, Sheik was considered to be the best character in Melee, with this position being held for nearly 6 years. Yes, even when other characters were winning majors more and more, like Marth and Fox, Sheik was still seen as the best character in the game, likely due to her prominence in the meta, as many top players were often Sheik mains or had a Sheik secondary. Even when she lost her position as the best in the meta, she simply couldn't be considered anything but top tier. and I feel even if this position wasn't taken for credit, the flexibility this character had and its effect on casual players may have gotten the attention of the development team for Super Smash Bros. Brawl, because oh dear lord, this was probably one of the most nerfed top tiers in between the transition from Melee to Brawl. Well, one of. 18 out of 23 of her moves had gotten some form of nerf, 6 of which are purely nerfed, at least what's listed on Smash Wiki, since some of these nerfed moves are also labeled with under change, which I guess isn't supposed to be interpreted as a strong nerf or a strong buff. Her throw game was completely fucked. There is no follow-up to any of her throws, and even if there were, the floaty physics would have certainly made them a lot harder to follow up on. Ironically, due to an increase of gravity on her character, she's vulnerable to chain grabs herself. A lot of her moves now have more unnecessary frames added onto them, with no auto cancel or interruptible compensation. Every single one of her aerials have had their hitboxes shrunk, their damage dropped down, and their knockbacks weakened. Her needles now deal less damage from a farther distance and can't cancel out other characters' projectiles. Another knockdown was her ability to transform between Sheik and Zelda. Since the data for both of them isn't loaded into the game at all times, this gives their transformation times much more inconsistency. And since they aren't compensated with any additional invincibility or intangibility, this means that they can be easily punished the moment the transformation is complete. Not only that, but while they transform in the air, they don't stall in place, instead gradually descending, which means that you can't switch to Zelda for recovery purposes, since by the time you're done, you'll have lost any additional length to recover. The only good thing I could find is that whenever you switch between the two, all stale move negation is resetted, meaning if you switch from Sheik to Zelda to Sheik, you can regain an entire fresh set of moves without the fear of having one move failing to kill or launch a character far enough. Then again, all that transforming is likely to get you easily punished. Damn, like, holy shit did she get nerfed to hell and back, which is probably why there exists a Sheik-Zelda pair tier, since as was intended by Sakurai, Sheik is simply supposed to be the damage racker, and if you wanted a good kill, you switched to Zelda to end it off. But how is that supposed to be achieved if the fucking game doesn't allow for a proper load between the two? Hello? Now, there are two big buffs for Sheik, one involving her recovery and the other being another move in her moveset that is the equivalent to her down throw in Melee. Kind of, not really. Okay, so with her recovery, she still has the same recovery as she did in Melee, the Vanish move, as her up special. In this game, that move not only grants her quicker time to begin the move, but also gives her no landing lag if she touches the ground before entering a helpless state. Not only that, but she got the ability to wall cling, providing an extra boost when playing on some stages, and Chain, her side special, has been converted into a tether recovery, giving her more options to recover with. Speaking of Chain, she also kind of got an indirect buff with the move through the use of the Chain Jacket glitch, which carries the property of any move previous to when she pulls out her chain and applies said property to the chain's hitboxes. This sounds a little ridiculously strong, especially given Chain's length, but I've actually found no tournament footage of it being used, which probably makes sense when you consider that Chain is still a cheesy move when used as an offensive tool, and is still easy to punish against as the opponent. So what about this other move? Well, it's not exactly a move that can lead into a tech chase, or a move that can lead into every single one of her aerials, or a move that requires any critical thinking, but hey, this move, aka forward tilt, has a few things going for it. For one, this move is the only move to be buffed through and through. Okay, kind of a lie, its base knockback and damage is weaker, but that in turn improves its combo potential, lasting much longer compared to just anything below 40%. Everything else, like having less ending lag, a more upward angle, and having a lesser SDI multiplier along with not putting opponents into tumble even at unreasonably high percentages, and yeah, this just becomes Sheik's centralized move for her. Best case scenario for some characters, you end up eating some damage and are hit away afterwards. Worst case scenario for other characters, you end up being hit and hit and hit repeatedly into very high percentage levels, only to be easily finished with an unavoidable sweet spot up smash. Now where have I heard this before? Some characters much higher than her on the list can have losing matchups against her, and I don't mean like a simple soft counter, I mean like hard countered against her, all just off a simple yet efficient swing kick. Now this is only on a few characters, many others she just goes even with her, and most of the top tiers actually counter her heavily, especially Ices and Pikachu, who can very easily 0 to death her just for trying to 0 to death them. Though she actually can't do it against them, but let me just make it sound more dramatic. Hell, characters lower than her only give her a +1 positive matchup, and one other even soft counters her since they are the most immune from the tilt lock, and her increased gravity, the only one so between Melee and Brawl, makes her vulnerable when hit vertically. This usually played heavily into her meta, where she was usually seen as a pocket character for a few specific matchups for the majority of top players. For some though, she was worth to try in main, at least for any players named Judo, Cross, now known as Sylph, Purple Guy, no, I'm not joking with that name, it's literally that, and whoa, wait, what? Yeah, apparently Armada played at some Brawl tournaments back when he was starting to make a name for himself overseas in Melee. He even got 17th at Genesis with Solo Sheik in the Brawl singles bracket. But still, by the end of the day, this character wasn't really one to have progress in the meta, but also not really fall behind. She's really the textbook definition of a pocket character in this game. Meh. Doesn't matter anyways considering her impact in the next installment. But we're not gonna talk about that one. Hey, at least we got to go see what she would have looked like in Twilight Princess. Yeah, I don't know where I'm going with this.
The young prodigy has returned. Beginning in 64 all the way to Brawl, Ness has... damn. He's actually gotten quite some chub stacked onto him. To be fair, that's apparently the way he looks in Earthbound, based on some descriptions in the game. But at the end of the game, it's stated by some dude that he lost all that chub and got more fit. And he does end up being, well, I wouldn't say chubby in Smash 64. So does that mean that between every Smash game, he's been eating calzones and burgers? What am I even talking about? LuigiLito, why did you write this in here? This has nothing to do with what we're talking about. Okay. Since it seems like LuigiLito is gonna go replay Earthbound for the 100th time, looks like I'm gonna have to take control of this segment. Ness is a character who relies on spacing, especially so given his arsenal of PSI ranged moves, PSI projectiles, and PSI throws that send opponents 100 miles away from Ness's location. Guess his mom taught him the stranger danger lesson though. I know it may sound weird to call Ness a spacey character. Yeah, sure, he has a lot of projectiles and his smash attacks are often ranged melee type moves, but his tilts are very small and often used by him to either start some sort of string or lock opponents. And his standing grab range, though longer than before, is still the lowest grab range in the game, making him have to get up close in order to give access to his multiple far launching throws. This also includes his dash grab, which looks like it should be longer but has a deceptive animation that gives it a blind spot. There is one reason though that makes Ness have to be more reliant on spacing in this game: getting grabbed. A major problem with Ness, and also Lucas, but that'll be brought up later, is the fact that both of them suffer from something called grab release. Okay, well every character suffers from grab release, but what's specific about Ness and Lucas and their grounded grab release? You know, being grabbed and released when touching the floor of any stage. We've discussed a bit of this in Wario's section, though that was primarily for aerial grab releases. So when it comes to grounded grab releases in Brawl, most characters are locked into a 29 frame window, where they can do or perform absolutely nothing. On the 30th window, the grabber is able to regain control of their character, while the victim should still be in his animation. Now outside of something like Zero Suit Samus's jab, you can't punish off this whatsoever, so it's nothing too extraordinarily game-breaking, but it should be told as a reminder that this is how it works for most of the cast. Most. Because for Ness and Lucas, they have a grounded grab release animation that is actually 40 frames long. No kidding. An extra 10 frames were added onto their grab release. From what there is, no one really knows why they have this specific animation, and since Sakurai doesn't say zip zap about Brawl's balancing, I doubt we'll ever find out. But for Ness, this forces him to play much more patiently, because one wrong move can easily lead to you eating massive damage and, against the right characters, maybe even 0 to death. This is why he has notoriously awful matchups against Marth, King Dedede, and Donkey Kong. Donkey Kong is especially awful since his grounded grab release animation is 10 frames shorter than the rest of the cast, and since he also has decent grab range, this leads to DK getting easy stocks off of Ness. Hell, even a matchup like Ness vs Bowser is considered even due to the same problem at hand, Bowser getting 10 less frames than the rest of the cast. However, unlike Donkey Kong, Bowser's more powerful moves are all somewhat slow, and he's also a sitting duck when he's unable to go for grabs. Nonetheless, this faulty grab animation has done more to weaken his chance of developing a good meta, more than the loss of double jump canceling or yo-yo glitches could ever do. However, he did get one buff that automatically makes him better than any of his old iterations: And that's the Mr. Saturn t-shirt all he has. Oh my god, it's so cute. Some notable players that played the character seriously were Vicegrip, Achorawl, who was especially known for being ranked in the top 10 of all of France as the only Ness, and Shaky. Fao also contributed heavily to Ness's meta, as he was one of the top Ness players in Brawl before switching to Meta Knight following a weak tournament placing at Apex 13. Ness has, or had, some small representation in the competitive community, but it's nothing really special. He's still cute, but not as cute as Yoshi, the cutest dinosaur the world's ever seen. Well, when he doesn't have 100 layers of shaders added onto him.
Yoshi was probably the character that got more nerfed from the changes in the game's mechanics and physics than from his transition fixes. Let's discuss. We'll talk about one of his biggest nerfs that could also be a helpful buff, the loss of his double jump cancel. The loss of double jump cancel affected Yoshi more than most other characters, since a lot of DJC combos were his bread and butter when in an advantageous position. Now that he no longer has that capability, he is severely limited on how to follow up, and it most certainly won't be aerial by aerial. However, double jump cancel also made him prone when recovering, since he was always forced to use his jump as a means of reaching towards the stage, and outside of subtracted knockback armor, he doesn't really have a means of protecting himself if he's knocked out of it. In Brawl, however, since using an aerial will still allow Yoshi to rise, he can safely rise himself upwards while having the chance to retaliate any possible edgeguarding scenarios. Though it's worth mentioning that in Brawl, his double jump armor no longer uses subtracted knockback. Instead, using non-subtracted knockback, which basically means that if the knockback threshold surpasses that of the armor unit, it doesn't just hinder his momentum and jump, but also launches him with the full knockback intended, which hurts his already weak approach game. Another big issue is his shield. Much like in 64 and Melee, he keeps himself retained in an egg as a shield, making him unable to be shield poked. However, unlike in 64, he cannot jump out of his shield in Melee and Brawl, severely limiting his punish options out of shield, and also any means of escaping shield pressure. Now, Melee had two things going for it that made Yoshi have more options when stuck in shield. One, he could light shield in order to be pushed back further away when hit. This gets him away from any possible shield pressure, and can even allow him to snap onto ledge instead of having to wait for the shield to push back and die down in order to get out of it. Two, Yoshi's shield in Melee has unique techniques like parrying and stored power shielding, that when played professionally, essentially allows him to punish his opponents much more quickly due to the lack of hit stun or hit lag when performing these techniques, making Yoshi somewhat of a threat to deal with up close. In Brawl, however, none of these options are available. No jump out of shield, no light shield, no advanced techniques, no nothing. What's even worse is that in Brawl, and Brawl only, a part of his feet is slightly out of shield's range, which can lead him to getting poked on platforms. Yeah, Yoshi's shield, which is supposed to surround his entire body, lets him get shield poked. This fucking game, man. All of this, along with other weak forms of defense, like a slow roll and an inability to glide toss, leads him to having possibly the worst defense in all of Brawl, and maybe even Smash as a whole. It is seriously pathetic for him, and is probably the reason why he is so low on the tier list. The only good defense option he has is his air dodge, which, yeah, everyone has good air dodges in Brawl. And his spot dodge, where he ties 4 other characters for having the best intangible to invulnerable frame ratio out of every other spot dodge. But they couldn't have just left him out like that. No. They had to have given him something in return. Like more power to his attacks or less laggy moves, right? Oh, you gotta be fucking kidding me. You know what? I gotta apologize to all Yoshi players that are veterans in the community. You guys aren't glue sniffers. You're all poor sufferers under Count Sakurai, being forced to consume these dietary buffs as a means of appeasement, and getting beaten with rock loads of nerfs just for trying to play this character, only to end up with your ass getting impaled. What? You thought I was gonna make a metaphor or something? Nah. This is honestly probably how it felt playing Yoshi at tournaments. But Yoshi's not dead last on this tier list. He's not even in a low tier spot, just one tier above it. So what does he have that makes him better than the rest of these guys? Like, there has to be something for him. Well, Yoshi's aerial prowess is really strong in this game. He has the best airspeed in the game, low gravity, and has decent air acceleration. His aerials all come out somewhat fast outside of forward and down area, but those ones can meteor smash, or put opponents in a much worse spot if it lands. His up aerial can send opponents upwards with defiant strength. His neutral aerial is helpful as to block off recovering opponents. As most of these types of aerials, His back aerial can wall off recovering opponents, or push opponents further to the side blast zones, made especially helpful by its doorstop springy animation for the hitboxes. He also has an improved recovery game. Obviously, the previously mentioned airspeed and low gravity help him here, but he also has more increase on his double jump, helped more by the magnet hands of his ledge grab box. He can also air dodge during his double jump rise, essentially giving him an invincible recovery that can't be challenged. He also gains a small boost when using his up special midair, which helps him reach ledge if slightly below, and also gives him a cover option when doing so. Less if it gets reflected back in your face. But hey, that's only a few matchups that you'll probably have to go through. Okay, so he has a great air game against most of the cast, and also has slightly better recovery than before. But come on, Jigglypuff has stuff like that too, and she's not in the same tier. There just has to be something, just something that this character has that pushes him up there. Like DDD or Ices with chain grab, or Diddy Kong with bananas. There just has to be something. Wait, chain grab. Chain grab. Grab? Grab! Oh my god, I forgot about the fucking long-reaching grab with the broken grab release that forces opponents into the air every time. Its pivot version is probably one of the best pivots for a tether range grab, since it is significantly shorter in terms of animation length, and the range is pretty absurd for it. Finally, I found the reason why Yoshi is in the position he's in. Feels great to get past this guy. Much like most of his player base the moment they realized he wasn't actually a good Meta Knight counter. Except for Poltergust. You keep doing you, man. Now, we make it down to E tier. These are the definitive low tier characters. Even though a lot of the earlier characters we talked about seem like they would fit more in line with this tier. But you know, whatever makes them happy, I guess. We start off, or more like, continue on, with another greenish fellow. The younger, mustachioed man, Luigi.
Well, if it ain't my fucking GOAT! Have you been wave maxing since your melee days, broski? Oh man, what the fuck? Luigi. Oh man, where do I go with this? Let's just start off with this. Luigi is probably another character that was hit hard by the removal of many mechanics in Melee, but passed through okay in terms of Luigi was always meant to be a somewhat floaty character, at least as floaty as a lanky, skinny Italian man could be. He received many changes towards his basic attributes, such as his ground speed being generally slower, and his overall weight, fall speed, and gravity being lighter, making him feel floatier as a character, but allowing him to perform multiple aerials in a single jump. Hell, in a single short hop, he can perform 3 aerials before landing, like double forward aerial into up air or double forward aerial into neutral air. He definitely has a much more improved air game, as he has an improved airspeed, though being the second lowest in Brawl, and getting a huge increase on his air acceleration, no longer being bottom 3. Not only that, but his approach with aerial moves is nothing to gawk at. Sure, he isn't compensated well when it comes to landing lag, and a lot of his moves lost their oomph to them, especially forward aerial, which doesn't KO opponents until 200%. But Luigi is one of 4 characters whose aerials can all auto-cancel out of a short hop, and since Luigi has much more float in his short hop, he can essentially act as an aerial fortress, making approaching him somewhat difficult. I get it's a little silly emphasizing Luigi like this considering Meta Knight is in the same list and can do all of those things too, but understand first that Meta Knight is simply built like that, and second, no other low tier really has this ability. Most others can only do at best 2 aerials in one short hop. Also, due to the very low hit lag, weak base knockback, and fast ending lag on most of his aerials, he's the only character that can string 2 aerials together in a short hop. Not even Meta Knight can do that with his triple up air short hop. Look, I'm not saying that Luigi is an impenetrable force. None of these aerials have like crazy disjointed hitboxes or transcendent priority, just that this gives Luigi a means of keeping foes on their toe and help put pressure on shielding opponents, both of which slipped out of his hands the moment wave dashing, one of his best movement options and means of approaching, was removed from Brawl. They even decreased his traction in this game too, like, what is even the point of this change for? He already had slippery enough shoes, why just make it worse? I mean, I guess it helps with running up smashes, and somewhat similarly Dacus. Although his aerials may have lost some power in exchange for lagless droppings, his grounded attacks can't be said the same. A lot of his old combo tools like up tilt and up air were given increased knockback scaling, leading them to work as solid KO options at high percentages. Some of his more useless moves like dash attack and down tilt have been completely fixed in this game, giving him more options in either neutral or or edge guarding, although his down angled forward tilt is still very pathetic. Want to know an angled move that isn't pathetic? Up angled forward smash, which compared to his normal forward smash has nearly half the amount of end lag reduced on it, and with its very quick startup regardless of angle, it technically makes it the fastest smash attack in Brawl, and a bloody good one at that, since it retains a lot of the KO power and grants it a higher angle than it did in Melee. His other smash attacks are good too. Up smash can cover a lot of get up options at ledge and is a good punish out of shields, you know, when it's not being pushed back a mile away. And down smash gives Luigi more of a low profile when performing the move, which not only lets him duck under horizontal attacks and jabs, but also brings his hitbox slightly downwards, which can punish those just below ledge. However, one of his best ground moves is jab, and for two reasons. Luigi has one of the most consistent triple jabs in the game. It happens very quickly and has a good launch when the third hit connects. His jab can also be jab cancelled, specifically the first hit of jab, since it is very quick and easy to lead up with, and when it does, you can get some serious punishes off of this. Even if your opponent is at 100%, you can still land a punish into most of everything, since it's really hard to SDI a one hit quick jab and also doesn't put characters into tumble, meaning no hit stun cancel or basic DI. This can give Luigi a free kill option should the opponent be just in reach or not perfect shield against it. One problem Luigi always had in Melee was a pretty piss poor recovery. Brawl manages to fix that problem, but only with Doc McStuff and band-aids. He has an increased double jump height, his up special rises way higher and has stronger horizontal air drift when descending, and his cyclone can be mashed much more easily for a very high rise, especially after a double jump. That's all good and makes his recovery about on par with someone like Meta Knight in terms of lasting long in the air, but it still leaves him vulnerable like how it always has. Outside of a possible misfire, he can be swiftly punished and pushed further off stage, since a lot of his recovery options either have no protective layer of hitboxes or any form of intangibility. Don't worry, they made up for it by giving like 4 of his moves spike angles. The issues with approaching, lack of disjoints outside of a few moves, and having a very exploitable recovery in spite of its increased airtime has led Luigi to fall over time, once being considered a possible mid-tier to now a definite low tier. He has pretty awful matchups against most of the top tiers because of this, and still has some trouble dealing with mid-tiers a lot of the time who may have similar issues in one boat, but not all. Luigi has had a dedicated player base behind him, but only 2 are worth mentioning due to their unlikely success with the character: Big Lou and Boss, both of which have seen decent performances at big majors or regionals when Brawl's popularity was just hitting its peak. Okay, fine, I'm sorry, but I also just gotta mention Luigi Sama. I mean, a lot of these guys really did well for their time with a low tier character, but this man got 17th at his most recent Brawl tournament, and it was a stacked one this year, let me tell you that, fellas. Sometimes you just gotta root for the loser, cause that's how you fuck with them. One man may be holding an L for all eternity, but another man can help him achieve in getting that W. Let's just consider the W getting a semi-high placing at a stacked tournament for a game that hasn't seen a presence like this in nearly a decade. Damn, does time fly? Speaking of which, I think it would be best to finally switch out that Pokemon of yours. It does look pretty tired, does it not?
Well, I was gonna have some cool Dub Talks and anime opening riff here, but then I realized Pokemon Trainer isn't the actual fighter. He's more so the carrier for the fighters. You see, Pokemon Trainer is simply a background element on stages as sort of a signal point for when you're retrieving different Pokemons, all of which are the actual fighters. Really, the reason Pokemon Trainer is only tagged as a single fighter in the tier list is because not only does the community treat all the Pokemon fighters under the same label, but the game is designed around you switching up your Pokemons. This effect is known as stamina, which causes your Pokemon to weaken the longer it's used. This was to encourage staying off of one Pokemon and to kind of give up that Pokemon experience. They even pushed it further so that every time the Pokemon you're using faints, the next Pokemon in the evolution process is automatically thrown out of your next stock. It's a bit ironic though, because the way they want you to switch out your Pokemon actually puts you in a disadvantaged position if you're in a bad spot. Pokemon Change, the only universal move for all the Pokemon outside of their final smash, requires it to be loaded off the disc, which just like Sheik and Zelda means the time between switching is very inconsistent. The move also has pretty decent end lag when wrapping up the switch, and you can only switch on the ground. If you're in the air, the move does nothing. Now there's a little technique that can bypass this known as zero switching, but it only works on very few competitive stages since it requires a moving platform to do so. This allows you to completely skip the end lag and can also give Squirtle and Ivysaur a little boost jump. But even then, your opponent will likely wait at the spot of the transformation occurring since again, you need to be on some sort of ground level to do it. So we're already kind of into a bad start for this guy, but apparently Pokemon Trainer or the triple team gameplay is the best use of this character team because individually, my god are they bad. One good thing I guess about this is that you can simply click on the Pokemon you want to start with on the character select screen to either put you at a better state at the start, or if you want to stick with one guy throughout the fight. So thankfully, you don't have to keep changing Pokemons every time you start the match just to get Charizard. That's good. Imagine having to make some sort of rule set on waiting for a trainer to get to the Pokemon they wanted every time they start the match. Either way, if you're going Solomon, and no, not that Solomon, your best bet is most likely Squirtle. On his own, Squirtle is considered the most viable Pokemon out of the three. Though that's not saying much, he's definitely not making top 8 at major tournaments just by himself. But he has more options in his kit than a lot of the other characters. He is very shrub sized and has a low profile crouch that can help him dodge some characters' grabs in this game, while also having an all around good shield size and a fast spot dodge to boost his quick reactive defense. He's also really good in the air, with great airspeed and mobility, fast aerials including an extremely reliably juggling up aerial, and a frame 5-4 aerial with excellent gipping potential, and a high double jump mixed with a pretty good recovery move, especially since the move has a pretty disjointed hitbox that makes it hard for opponents to intercept. He can also make up for his weak approach game on the ground with shell shifting, an advanced technique that allows Squirtle to slide quite some distance while being able to perform any action. Not only does it make for a good retreat option, but the ability to do it repetitively and being able to commit any action once a turnaround animation is complete gives Squirtle much needed help and acts somewhat similar to a wave dash, which is like the last thing you expect to see from Brawl. Of course, it's not that simple to perform, and Squirtle still has the problem of having many weak stubby moves in his kit and very little range to him. He's also very light, being the second lightest in the game and can be re-grabbed out of grab release by a lot of the cast. Nonetheless, he still boasts better than his friend on the next evolutionary step, Ivysaur. Man, this fella is such a poor sap to play. If Pokemon trainers' Pokemon were put into their own tiers individually, many would likely say that Ivysaur is the worst character in Brawl, and maybe all of Smash. However, since the tiers are developed with the triple tag team in mind, Ivysaur shares one spot with the rest, but that doesn't mean Ivy becomes a favorite character in matches because honestly, players will probably take a hit when transforming into Charizard than have to play Ivysaur at all. Most of Ivysaur's moves are pathetically weak and easy to SDI out of. Even Ivy's strongest move, Up Smash, which is the strongest one of the game, is pitifully slow on startup and end lag, leaving Ivy open up to an easy punish. Forward Aerial, usually considered Ivy's quickest KO move and one with decent range, doesn't really KO until about 130% on stage, so its usefulness is only good against offstage opponents, and that's only the ones recovering horizontally due to the limited range of the vine swings. Also, as mentioned, being stacked with stale move negation on knockback and the stamina mechanic can weaken the power of these moves very weakly. Ivysaur's air and recovery game is absolutely awful. Most of Ivy's aerials either suck at hitting or suck in general even when they hit. Ivysaur has zero attack options at ledge outside of forward air because down air will get Ivy punished easily if trying to come back on stage, and up air forces Ivy downwards when performed. Vine Whip can be used as a means to fighting against opponents near ledge, but this is an extraordinarily risky move to commit to, and one shield block will likely mean the end of their stock. Vine Whip is just a genuinely awful recovery move. It's a tether that only reads diagonally like Olimar's tether recovery, meaning it can be easy to ledge grab against, and also puts Ivy into free fall if used once. There exists no other recovery options for Ivysaur, so this is your one shot to make it back to stage, making Ivysaur's offstage survivability one of the worst in the game. Ivysaur's survivability is also drastically weakened by elemental effectiveness. This is basically an iron triangle system where one Pokemon is either weak or resilient against a specific element. For example, Squirtle is resistant towards fire moves, meaning he takes 10% less knockback if hit with a fire move, but is weak to grass, which means he takes 10% more knockback when hit with a grass move. Same goes with Charizard, resistant to grass moves but weak to water moves. Now usually this system will play out well with Ditto matches between Pokemon trainers, but this mechanic also extends out to any other character that possesses these elements in their kits, or Fire with Mario's Forward Smash, which means Ivysaur eats the most shit out of anyone else, because Ivysaur's elemental effectiveness is one who is resistant to water but weak to fire. There are only 2 characters in the entire game who possess anything else that isn't fire. Kirby, who can copy Squirtle's Water Gun move and Ivysaur's Bullet Seed move, and Mario with his Flay. Even then, both these guys still have fire attributes attached to some of their moves, copied or not. And since there are many other characters with fire effective moves, this means that Ivysaur's survivability is absolutely awful in comparison to the other Poke allies, which just gives a better reason why no one would or should pick this character, and also gives me a reason to switch to the final Gen 1 Pokemon, Charizard. The final evolution of all the Pokemons not related to one another is Charizard. Charizard in this game is ass, there's no hiding it. But he's not as ass as Ivysaur. He does have a few saving marks. His best move of them all is Rock Smash, a move that deals a whopping 18% on hit and can lead to 43% if the fragments all connect. Can put heavy pressure on shield due to damage and pushback it does. Can catch spot dodges and rolls due to the surrounding fragments releasing. Can KO opponents at mild to high percentages, and can both be performed on the ground and in the air with no damage or lag compensation. Outside of that, he also has good range for his super heavy, especially for his smash attacks, all of which can kill below 110%. And his agility on the ground is pretty fast, though his airspeed and mobility, not so much. With long range usually comes long grabs. and Charizard sure as hell has one. The longest non-telegrab in fact, though he does pull his head into this move so it's not as crazily disjointed as most would expect. Even with a great grab range, he does actually have good throw windows, with back throw being a fast option to throw opponents off stage or further away. Forward throw helping lead into possible options like neutral air or short hop rock smash, and down throw can knock out opponents at high percents. Charizard also has a decent recovery, having 2 mid-air jumps, a long vertical recovery move that can kill at high percents, and a glide. This is pretty good for someone of super heavyweight status, as most others have a short or linear recovery. He also has great survivability, as he ranks in the top 10 for both vertical and momentum canceling, and as mentioned, his super heavyweight status allows him to survive a lot more punishing attacks. However, he is still susceptible to early combos and chain grabs, and a lot of his idling animations have him move his head and tail around, so you may get some odd hits in if you're playing him. Despite his good range on a lot of moves, he can still get punished for doing them due to being either slow on startup or in lag, or just not having crazy disjoints or intangibility on parts that probably should have it. Something a character like Donkey Kong doesn't have to worry about since his moves are disjointed to high hell. Which means he won't get punished even when performing the move. Ultimately, Charizard's slow speed in the air, laggy moves, and of course the effective stamina doesn't allow Charizard to truly rise and shine alone in the meta. And though he is leagues behind being a decent level like Squirtle, he is also leagues away from being the worst or even bottom 5. So he does play a committal role in the Pokemon Trainer's kit for power swinging kills or damage racking attacks, should Squirtle not be available. That's really all has to be said about Pokemon Trainer and his Pokemons. As noted by his position on the tier list, the character specific effects of stamina on all Pokemons and elemental effectiveness on one doesn't help. And due to the high learning curve required to learn all 3 Pokemons, Pokemon Trainer was not a popular character throughout the whole meta. Only a few were able to get results with the character. Steeler, who placed at a decent 33rd at MOG Dallas 2010, and the Reflex Wonder, who co-mained the character along with Wario, and did pretty well at locals, regionals, and Meta Knight Band tournaments like Wabo 4, with a 9th place finish. Reflex, if you're watching this, please come back. I need to see more Pokemon Trainer. The footage I gathered was not enough. I yearn for more Pokemon Trainer. Now we move on to Pokemon Trainer's best friend, apparently. At least if you play through Subspace Emissary, Lucas. I don't see the matchup for this one. I mean, not the literal matchup. That's slightly in Pokemon Trainer's favor. More so the connection matchup between the two. Pokemon Trainer just looks like the guy that just makes fun of dead moms.
From the one game the West will never get until the heat death of the universe, Lucas makes his debut for Super Smash Bros. Brawl. Barely. Sakurai literally admitted that had he known that Mother 3 was not going to get a Western release during its development, he never would have worked on Lucas, or at least he would have held him off from Brawl during the time. Now, much like the consensus of people who played Mother 3 before the 4th chapter, Lucas is a poor, sappy kid who seems to fight for the sake of staying alive, but looks like he'd rather just cry in the middle of the stage and act like a little whiny baby boo to the opponents who already have to hear that shit at home. Oh, well. No, that is not the representation Lucas deserves. He should be smiling, being energetic, being held through his power and will, being Lucas. Sorry, this was corny as fuck. Let's just get back to what we were supposed to talk about. If you ever play Mother 3, you'll know that Lucas's personality isn't the only thing incorrectly matched with his Smash iteration. He also shares almost none of the powers he has in his game. Most of his special attacks and properties seem to correlate more with Kumatora's attacks and powers. That's much more offensive PSI, compared to Lucas, whose PSI moves are generally attributed as buffs, debuffs, or defenses. Even his Tether Grab is borrowed from Duster in that game. Anyways, what I'm trying to get here is that despite holding a lot more useful specials, as most of them are designed to keep opponents at bay, like PK Fire and PK Freeze, both of which are relatively much speedier in frame data compared to Ness's renditions, and having a lot more range with his attacks since most of them hold PSI particles that even Ness doesn't have on a lot of his moves. He's still forced to play a spacious game against some opponents and has a lot of lag on his ground moves. And I get that, unlike his clone counterpart, Lucas isn't an energetic prepubescent kid with a lot of spunk, but Ness's ground attacks weren't exactly the speediest parts of his moveset, so with Lucas, a lot of these attacks end up being very situational. Sometimes they may be helpful for either edge guarding or threatening someone on platforms, but generally, you're going to be aiming more for your tilts rather than your smash attacks in scenarios since whiffing them will easily get you punished. So more often than not, smash attacks are usually reserved for the flashy hard reads. Even his fastest move, down tilt, is only useful when tech locking opponents, as it doesn't chain reliably until very high percentages and is unsafe on hit at low to medium percentages. His aerial game is also kinda meh. He has the up air just like Ness, and his back aerial and down aerial have meteor hitboxes, but they are very specific hitboxes that come out on a specific frame of each move, and missing them can easily lead to retaliation. Forward aerial is a good kill move at higher percentages, so just Ness's back air but when facing forward, and his neutral air is actually decent. It's very fast and can lead to a tech lock if you manage to footstool the opponent right before the move ends. His grab game is pretty good, and he has more reach with the rope snake, but is also likely to get punished for missing it. All of his throws beside forward throw have good usage depending on what part of the stage he's on or what percent his opponent is at. He also has improved recovery compared to Ness, as his PK fire can push him backwards, meaning some horizontal distance if facing the other way. His tether grab acts as a tether recovery when grabbing ledge, though it is much shorter in length compared to most Z air tether recoveries. Finally, PK Thunder is still PK Thunder, but the lightning bolt is much safer to pull around Lucas since an opponent trying to get the lightning can't make it disappear since the lightning works as a multi-hit move, going straight through the opponent while dealing consecutive damage. I mean, he's still easy to punish since hitting Lucas will get rid of the lightning ball, and Lucas leaves himself opening when doing the former mentioned recovery options, but it's still a bit better than Ness's one and only. Really, his most versatile move is PK Fire. For one, the move goes in the same direction at the same length and speed whether you're on ground or midair. 2, it's a spacious move, as it gives Lucas some pushback, but also pushes the opponent away if the move makes contact with them. And 3, it has many technical attributes tied to it, like being able to make your double jump higher, allowing you to mix up your aerial approach when edge guarding or trying to beat up an air campy player, or can perform a wave bounce with the move and mix it up with a well-timed PK magnet to slide across the stage or recover from far distance. Though this one is a lot less practical to do in tournament, and it wouldn't really help either way with this problem. Much like Ness, Lucas suffers from the same 10 extra frame punishment when being released from a grab. What makes it worse for Lucas, though, is that he's slightly bigger compared to Ness, making him easier to grab should the opponent's not timed correctly, and he doesn't have the proper moves or speed to really keep his opponents from grabbing it, something Ness already has a hard time doing even with his faster range move and fast ground speed. For Lucas, trying to get up close with many characters is a death sentence, and even those with unreliable grab releases can still punish Lucas easily for trying to get up all in their face. As a result, Lucas was considered a slight bit inferior to Ness and didn't have much results throughout the meta. Even with players like Pink Fresh, Oats, Faye, and Mekos, Lucas just couldn't get into top 8 and had only achieved one top 16 placement at a major. You know, it must have really sucked being Lucas at the time. The dude underwent so much trauma during the release of his game, but ultimately put those feelings aside when it mattered, understanding that trauma leads to personal growth. Yet, by the time he gets the Smash invitation, he's forced back into this mentality that he's just a sap. He's portrayed as a scaredy cat, depressed child who doesn't have any sort of developmental growth until, I want to say, the fight with LM, which, hey, at least pays homage to the game that throughout his journey he starts to mature over time. But in every other part of the game, he's just so sappy. He seems to have this I just don't have it in me look in all his animations. Like when he talks to the rope snake, he just looks so non-committal to the conversation. Even when he wins, he can't crack a fucking smirk, let alone a smile. And just a reminder that this was, for many, the first time Lucas was seen by Western audiences. So now, most people resonate with this idea that Lucas is this weak sap who lets his emotions overcome his strength. Furthermore, his debut in this game ended with him having his worst ranking in the series yet. And even when he wants to win, he just can't, because he just lets his opponents win by not trying to break away further from the downward spiral. Honestly, I'm just glad this was really a brawl-only thing, because in the later Smash games, they give him a bit more energy in his moves, and he doesn't seem to hold as much of a grudge in his animations. So I guess Lucas did get a happy ending after all. Too bad he was originally held off, since Ness took most of his moves as customs, but still, the ending is what counts. And for Lucas, it could have turned out much worse. Now we begin into the final tier, the F tier. A tier so bad, it dropped characters who had names relished to their titles from past ventures into a bunch of nobodies, only known for how terrible they are. Funnily enough, all these guys are veterans from earlier games, representing America's treatment of its soldiers after they leave their service. Whoops! Sorry, where was I? We begin our bottom of the barrel scraping with the older mustachioed man himself, Mario.
Man, this poor sucker just can't catch a break. It seems like every game since the original Smash Bros. Has just been a state of decline for him. Two of Mario's biggest drawbacks in Melee were his KO power, as he only has a few moves that could work as reliable finishers, and his short and predictable recovery options. Now, in a game like Brawl, there are plenty of characters who have KO power, and even on their tilt and having a favorable ledge grab design for each character along with a more floatier physic, you'd think Mario would get some sort of drastic boost in these categories. Nah, they just made him worse. Literally, all of these changes and nerfs between the two games are just put on him, and for no reason too, because even with the competitive aspects removed, Mario was designed as a jack-of-all-trades kind of fighter, and he wasn't even the best rendition of that in Melee. I just find it weird that they slammed him with all these nerfs when some of these moves were already pretty basic level attacks or purposefully situational. Up tilt, up air, and down tilt lost any potential uses for comboing. Up throw and down throw not only lost their combo potential as well, but lost their chain grabbing potential with it. Man, poor Mario. And even though forward throw does have some chain grabbing potential, it has very naive usage outside of a few matchups. To be fair to these moves though, this was more likely done due to the universal mechanics of hit stun canceling and whatnot. But the removal of chain grab follow-ups was definitely intentional, there's no doubt about it. All the smash attacks lost some of their knockback scaling, making its KO ability worse. Tied with stale move negation on knockback being effective, and a very stale Mario intentionally has no kill options until very high percentages. Down smash is still good as an edge sweeper move though, especially since Mario crouches further down when performing the move, which allows him to dodge some really close range grabs. Okay, not really close. His aerials all got really nerfed too, with his neutral aerial no longer being a visible kill option for when characters try to follow up on you, nor a good combo ender, since there are barely any combos in this game, and most players who played much more carefully knowing aerials can be pulled out much quicker than Melee. Forward aerial is a bit mixed. For one, it has weaker damage, increased landing lag if landing before the auto cancel window, and a late hit that does jack shit, meaning the strong meteor hit isn't used throughout. On the other hand, its auto cancel window is much earlier in the move, allowing it to be used timely for short hops. And with the change of meteor canceling window, this helps give the move an early KO option against recovering opponents. Though Mario's preferred aerial is most definitely his back air, which has increased range, has increased damage on clean hit, which has a weaker damage on late hit, which allows it to be connected twice with another back air, better by the fact that it can be used twice in a short hop. This is the approach tool for Mario in a lot of matchups, especially one where he is easily outranged by his other moves. And his down air no longer... Wait, his down special is now his down air? Then what the hell did they give him for his down special? Oh my god. Oh my god. Mario's specials in Melee all have their own purpose. Mario's neutral special Fireball acts as a means of a projectile, which has still worked as such for better or for worse in Brawl 2. Sub-special gave him a means of recovering in such a good punch upwards, but having somewhat of a short range length. It's still like that here, but the way sweet spotting towards ledge and the generous ledge grab boxes work for the game does give Mario a much safer means of riding back up to the ledge, and it is a bit more effective at launching opponents away on the final hit, though you'll never see that used as a means to KO to the top. It did lose its ability to wall jump during a specific part of the animation, so any extra vertical height from doing 2-up specials is gone, but this wouldn't have fixed much of Mario's recovery problem. What did that are next two specials. His side special Cape, which in Melee was a good reflective move that was very excellent in edgeguarding opponents, still acts as the same way, but has removed a lot of its edgeguarding capabilities, now being ideally in favor as a reflector move, at least from the developer's intentions. Now some of these issues are rather from the Brawl's mechanics rather than the move itself, like in Melee where opponents can't grab ledge from behind. Now they can do it easily here in Brawl, mean you can't just sit at a ledge where your opponent is from a distance and cheese them to their death. But some changes like the hitboxes being shrunk so as to not go below the edge, and the reversing hitboxes also lasting much shorter, definitely pulled back the effect it had on edgeguarding foes. It doesn't mean it isn't possible, it's just that you're gonna have to get off your ass and dive down there with them. Definitely work an aspect of the move now, but apparently this loss of edgeguarding potential instead allowed the team to create a completely new special move for Mr. Mario. Instead of having his usual tornado move, which was quote-unquote change to his down air, even though it doesn't hold much of the same properties it did before, his down special has been replaced with the Flood from Super Mario Sunshine. Flood is a weird addition. It's also a shitty one too. Its purpose is to add as a edge guarding or get off option for Mario. It's a move with charge to it. The longer you charge it, the more distance it covers. Even then, just a first slash of charge covers quite a bit of front of you. He can also alter the angle of the move, meaning it can be brought down to a lower trajectory or higher trajectory when performing the move. Now this all sounds like a good option for Mario, and it is for any game that isn't Brawl, because in Brawl, it's pretty shit. Although the move seems to have excellent reach when fully charged, it can easily be pushed back against for the majority of its range power. Speaking of pushback, when Mario performs the move, the pressure from the nozzle spray pushes him back a bit. I have no idea why they added this in. My only assumption is that it's supposed to be a sort of anti-ledge force against Mario so you don't get an easy sweet spot cover that negates any chance of an opponent to successfully recover. And if that were to be true, well, Why? It's a move that's purpose is to ledge guard. Even at 100%, an opponent that gets hit by the mid-range of the move only gets a bit of pushback, and since Brawl's ledge helps opponents reach a ledge from a further distance, this intentionally treats the close range of the nozzle, which is the most effective spot of the move, completely useless outside of close quarter interactions. Not only that, but unlike Tornado, the move doesn't give Mario any sort of vertical distance. It has no hitbox, and it deals 0 damage. I just don't get why he needs this. Cape already functioned as an effective edge guarding move too, but they just nerfed that and gave him another one, which also isn't good because if you want it to be effective, your opponent has to at least be at mid-range from where you are, and you always get this dumb pushback when you release a fully charged one. So like, what the hell was the point? Generally, why did they do this? Why get rid of a favorable recovery option just for a shitty edge guarding move that Mario already has as one of his specials? Am I the only one pointing this out? Mario wasn't a strong candidate to be a good character in Melee's meta, and it's the same here. The only difference is that he lost almost all of his fundamental combo tools and was nerfed to a lot of spots he probably shouldn't have been, most notably with his few KO options. Not only that, but he can be easily chain grabbed by the top tiers, including a near 0 to death by King DDD. Players like Bo X7, Urios, KirinBlaze, and Boss did try with the character. They often had to dual main him with another character of choice, preferably ones that covered his more unfavorable matchups, and if they didn't, well, they only saw mild success at locals and a few regionals. Poor Mario would never get out of the low tier space. He was just simply another man born with a blue collar around his neck. Birthed, lived, and died in shit. But at least that's just the blue collar memento. Can you imagine being something as much as a higher occupation, say an alien bounty hunter, and falling off so hard that you're in the same boat as a blue collar worker?
Oh look, another veteran character that was heavily nerfed between the transition from Melee to Brawl. Jeez, I wonder how many more of these we have to go through before this video ends. Now, for many people, they might not realize how bad this character is, since even though her character icon is often selected in tournament, they mostly do it to boot up a Zero Suit Samus, and even if they forget to input correctly during a match, they can easily call a timeout period or gentleman with the opponent in order to change it to Zero Suit Samus via the D-pad input shortcut. Even the Smash wiki says that this is her most useful benefit as a character. Ouch. Well, I mean, if she's this low but not at the bottom, surely she has some tools in her kit that give her at least slightly viable options than other non-viable characters down here, right? Yeah, I guess. Her neutral game is very powerful for a bottom tier character, as she has many projectiles in her arsenal, some pretty disjointed smash attacks, and a long grab that looks pretty threatening. Even made better with its ability to cancel all lag when landing, allowing Samus more quicker options for spacing. Her grab aerial is probably the best tether in the game, as it has very long range for a tether, a hitbox that stays out until the move is retreated, and doesn't put her into a helpless state, which improves her recovery that was mostly maintained from Melee. The engine of Brawl has definitely impacted her the most. Physics make floatier defensive plays a much more favored playstyle for most characters, and for someone like her, a floaty heavyweight with many projectiles, you'd think it helped give her a bit of a boost. But she lost the ability to wave dash dance consecutively, and crouch cancel effectively, a lot of these being vital to her Melee competitive play. Although, it's not just the loss of mechanics and techniques between the two games, as even her intended design being preserved, it's still much weaker than before due to the weakening of many of her projectiles, such as her charge shot at every charge level, and also the speed of her missiles, which go much slower. Even her super missile is extremely predictable due to the slow speed throughout its animation. She also lost a lot of potent kill options for many of her moves, like neutral aerial, which was a staple for helping her get out of combos and knocking the opponent extraordinarily far away. In Brawl, it doesn't even kill until 205%, near the ledge. Down smash, forward smash, dash attack, and even back aerial have all gotten weaker too, which makes killing options much more difficult for Samus. She also lost combos off of her throws, has some of the worst grab ending lag in Brawl, and for some reason was supposed to have a fixed up smash that blinked reliably, but gave the move an increase on its SDI multiplier. What's the purpose in doing that? It's so inefficient, you could have simply ported Melee's animations and properties to the move and it would function exactly as programmed. She also has an ugly defense game. Her spot dodge and air dodge is about on par with the rest, and her shield does cover her body, but the moment it starts shrinking, parts of her suit become more exposed, leaving her open for shield pokes. Worse though, is her awful roll, which not only has less intangibility, but also maintains the amount of end lag the roll had, making it slow and easily predictable. Furthermore, she is prone to chain grabs by most of the cast that has one, including a 0 to death under DDD's hand. So, all in all, her best playstyle is when she is forced to play Zoner, as trying to be offensive will lead to her only kill options being gradually weaker and her game plan very predictable. And although she does probably have the best zoning in the game for someone in bottom tier, which leads to her having unique matchups against some few range limited characters, she is also outplayed by better zoners in the mid to high tier section. And the few potent kill moves she has can also be punished due to their lagging animations in spite of being disjointed or with decent range cover. She had a few players that had gotten results. Hey, it's better than what we could do with said character. YB in Japan, and also Noid and Hobo Zyro in America. Esam also had a pretty decent Samus secondary, although this may have just been a carryover from playing her in Melee, and all the matches of him playing her were non-bracket matches. So, yeah. Samus was never seen as a tournament viable character in the Brawl competitive scene due to the differing physics and heavy nerfs she received transitioning from Melee to Brawl. You know, it's all about nerf this and nerf that. But what if I told you that there is a veteran that somehow got buffed more than was nerfed and is still considered a bottom tier? From one bottom tier to another, it's the king of the Koopas, Bowser.
Bowser in this game is a fundamentally superior character over his Melee counterpart. In Melee, he was dog shit. No joking about that. Outside of like 2 moves, he was slow, way down like a pile of bricks, and couldn't use the engine of Melee to push himself further. In Brawl, the team treated him as if they were addressing all of these issues, and hey, that could have worked well for him had the engine still have been Melee. Could you imagine Bowser in Melee with the buffs and move changes from Brawl? He moved from bottom 1 to bottom 5. Bowser has seen a lot of positive attribute changes, such as increased walk and dash speed, increased weight, which along with an excellent momentum cancel allows him to survive significantly longer than any other super heavyweights. Slower falling speed, though he still does feel somewhat heavy in the air, faster air dodge and spot dodge, and heavily increased airspeed and acceleration. He also has increased a bit in size in some parts of his body, which although may extend his hurt box, it helps extend his range of his moves, and a lot of his moves got power buffs, with all tilts and jab having complete intangibility on his arms when attacking, and a few more body parts intangible on his smash attacks and aerial. Though he doesn't have any form of armor, whether performing a move or not, damage and knockback changes are roughly mixed across the board. But one thing that is a constant though, most moves is that their hitbox stay out a bit longer or the hitboxes come out on a quicker frame. It's really weird knowing that Melee forward smash is stronger than Brawl forward smash in terms of knockback scaling, because at 50% this move looks like shit, and the same goes in Brawl. Even though the impact should make it look like he would have been launched further, don't get me wrong, though these moves of his are still some of the strongest in the games, and some moves did get a knockback increase on them one way and another, like down tilt with its base knockback and back aerial with its knockback scaling. Bowser is a powerhouse of his archetype, and with a better air prowess, a good grab reach, along with an advantageous frame advantage when releasing opponents in favorable ledges. Surely Bowser could get results to back up his claim as being the biggest, baddest, toughest fighter in Brawl. But that couldn't be any further from the truth. Bowser is big, and big characters are more stubby than agile, or generally more likely to become combo food, even in a game where combos don't naturally exist. And speaking of combos, Bowser has absolutely nothing worth of combos outside whatever he could follow up from an aerial grab release. All his moves are too laggy, even the tilt. He has no compensation on a lot of his aerial landing lag. He still maintains his awful jump squat that limits his punish game, and a general design of hit stun canceling rid any chance of a punish game, even if these problems were overridden. Even though Bowser has seen some speed increases across the board of attributes, he is still amongst one of the slower characters overall. And in Brawl, slow characters get punished hard by the fast characters, even ones in mid-tier level. So a lot of the time, Bowser's forced to play and retreat in order to avoid getting turned into Chow, or forced to try and approach if being camped against or at a stalking disadvantage. All his specials suck too. Outside of up special, which is used on stage or out of shield, that shit still cooks in this game. Fire Breath is still sucks since he can SDI and punish freely off this move, and his edge guarding status is slightly better since the move can be angled now, but Bowser still has better better options when edgeguarding his opponents. Whirling Fortress, as mentioned before, is good on stage, but recovering for it is still one of the worst in the game. It has barely any vertical rise. The horizontal rise needs to be hella mashed for some push-up and can be gimped very easily or edge-hogged. Bowser Bomb is so bad, the link between rising hit and slamming hit isn't even true, so you can just air dodge out of the move. And a knockback, although better, still isn't powerful enough to KO until later percentages, and its hitboxes stay out for so little that it has no form of pressure when shielding, spot dodging, or rolling opponents, all of which can easily punish afterwards. Its best use is just as another option for Bowser to grab ledge. Finally is its side special, Flying Slam, which is helpful for easy suicides but doesn't kill until high percentages, which is a bit weak for a super heavyweight body slamming you into the stage with her man pecs. You're literally telling me a strong backhand toss can kill opponents earlier than a move where you can just get fucking sandwiched between the stage? Come on. I thought all of those thwomps in his cancel would have made him know it and master the art of slamming on top of your opponents. Also, because of his large size, he's very, very easy to chain grab. Remember, Bowser, just because you don't have it doesn't mean you're affected by it. Also, the worst nerf was his sub 100% get up attack, which no longer covers a third of the stage and grants less intangibility. Truly, the end of it all, Bowser Bros. Although given a chance in early meta due to his conceived buffs, Bowser quickly fell out of favor as just another victim of Sakurai's slow and heavy formula. A lot of his player base was known from this era, as any post-LMG saw nothing for Bowser outside of low tier brackets. Only Zixta, Silk, and King Kong had gotten results with the character, and only on a regional level. And other players like Vex or Isam usually play the character during early pools or exhibition, reserving their mains for anything beyond that. Nothing wrong with that. I mean, why bother playing a little bottom tier at big level tournaments? In fact, playing them in pools is already ballsy enough, considering that you would run into some kindergartner playing Meta Knight and still have the possibility to lose, especially as Bowser. Listen, an overall a really ugly matchup chart, with two characters being nigh unwinnable for him, both of which have the same bullshit against him. The Ice Climber and King DDD with their easy 0 to death chain grabs. Holy brought this up about 3 times already. Can there be one character who isn't nullified because of DDD's stupid infinite chain grab? Oh, there is? It's the next one actually. Huh. Didn't know for a second. I thought this whole tier was just the DDD infinite tier, but yeah, you know, can't always expect every chick in every egg. He's returned, the Falcons captain. Falcons suffered some of the ugliest nerfs during the transition to Brawl, and although the biggest nerf to his character was something outside of simply portion changes and property values, it would be in our best interest to talk about what was directly changed for him, rather than go into the obvious first and foremost. Gotta beat the dog down before putting him down. All of Falcon's ground attacks have been increased ending lag to them, or a decreased knockback, notably on his smash attacks. They also lack any good range on them and are notable for having low disjoints, making clanking more common and his reach much smaller. All of his areas have increased landing lag to them, though this is somewhat remedied by the fact that they can all auto cancel out of a short hop depending on when it's performed during such. Forward area was harmed the most, as it now requires a perfect 1 frame sweet spot hit that only covers the tip of the knee, along with having nerfed knockback compared to the original, with the late hit being extremely pathetic in terms of damage and knockback. However, it has some uses for wall of pain scenarios. There are also other changes that indirectly nerf this move's threatening power that had it in melee, some from the physics, but also some from other nerf moves like his grab and throws. His grab is very short range compared to everyone else, only being higher than Ness's grab range, and his forward throw, up throw, and down throw lost all of their combo and chain grab potential due to the universal solvent of hit stun canceling, which for a character like Captain Falcon, who is reliant on having a strong combo game due to his lightning fast nature, is something that no character should ever have to go through, but Falcon did for 6 years. Falcon's ground game was completely retouched. His traction is hella lighter, making turnarounds generally a lot less quick and making punishing out of shield much more difficult. It only made it worse by the fact that his shield stun is pretty lengthy for someone that doesn't have a unique shield, though the decreased traction does mean he slides far when doing running up smashes, an actual strategic matchup for Falcon when playing on platform stages. Falcon is also forced to play in the air much more than before, as his once powerful approach and punish mix-ups and movement options are either lost to the engine of melee or halted by the infrequent tripping and hit stun cancelling that doesn't allow him to follow up properly. He also has a slower dash speed, although being the second highest rank, this does make trying to follow up much more difficult, or more so impossible in this game given the fact he also loses a lot of momentum from the ground to the air, which even with an increase in airspeed makes chaining virtually impossible, made even worse with the additional mechanic of hit stun cancelling, hit stun cancelling, hit stun cancelling, hit stun cancelling, hit stun cancelling. Do I have to keep saying it in every segment of the segment? Captain Falcon was designed in as a fast combo character regardless of whether scenario he's put in. Neutral can routinely dash around the stage or use burst options. Approach can fish for grabs or toss out a short hop fastfall aerials as means to reach or pressure the opponent that can then lead to a combo sequence. Advantage? Combo time possibly leading to kill. Disadvantage? Can break out of combo using a fast starting aerial and possibly start a new combo sequence off of that. It always felt like the engine of each game designed around Captain Falcon. I mean, his design just worked in every game until this one. In this game where defensive maneuvers are treated with more reward and offensive plays are given out to the top of the class, Captain Falcon doesn't really have much going for him since he was never designed for a floaty, slow-paced, cancel-heavy defensive gameplay style. As a result, he never got the following he had in something like Melee or even Smash 64. That doesn't mean he doesn't have positivity. He had kill options that would kill if they landed. He has one of the best grab releases, with some characters either being able to re-grab out of a dash grab, others being to stay out of long enough to get hit by neutral air or running up Smash's initial hit. And for Ness, Lucas, and Wario, getting it straight hit in the face with his forward aerial. His recovery and survivability is also good, having a heavy weight along with a fast fall speed that can drop him down like a brick. This makes his vertical survivability really good, and his horizontal momentum cancelling is a top 10 contender. With an increased airspeed, this also allows him to reach much closer to stage even when falling faster on the side, and his side special Raptor Boost can finally grab the ledge when going straight at it. The move did lose his ability to pass through projectiles, though that's a trade-off for having a contempt recovery, though he's still punishable off stage since his up special and side special are pretty slow ending, if not right next to the ledge, though it's also not super free as getting hit by either of these can be a death case scenario for the opponent. Regardless, Captain Falcon's inability to combo reliably and not use his speedy movement to the max severely weakens his playstyle, with the new physics and engine certainly not helping in any case whatsoever, and the nerfs also just kicking a dead man down. For a while in the early meta, Captain Falcon was seen as a complete bottom tier. Well, he still is, but he was dead last for a while and was always seen as completely unviable to the design of the Brawl in general. Honestly, the only reason he wasn't bottom tier was likely due to his presence at low tier tournaments, where he actually plays very well, winning some completely solo under the names of Ali and Strumba. Even with these two competent players, they only ever played the character at these sort of events, never maining or even secondary maining character for competitive brackets. This made Captain Falcon mains a rare find at tournaments outside of locals or your friends' garage setups. Lordy is the only Captain Falcon main in Brawl to get results and the only one to actually play the character in competitive brackets. Yes, Daiki did get better results in his country, but he admits that he usually plays Falcon as a for fun character rather than as a character he's willing to put time and effort in, and often played his mains in specific matchups that were extremely difficult for Falcon to play in at all. Therefore, he never had the representation he would get unlike in any other games besides this one, and sunk into inescapable quicksand of the bottom tier. Maybe if they just let him use his fucking gun, he would be SSS tier. Like, seriously, he would have been SSS tier already. I mean, they let Link use a fucking magic weapon from the 13th century. So what's really wrong with using a magic weapon from the 31st century?
Link has returned in Brawl, sword and everything. Unlike with the first two games, Link, along with the rest of the crew from here on, take their character design from Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, which shows all of the characters as being rather strong and powerful, even at their base level design. Apparently, Sakurai never got the memo. But we're not going to jump on all three just yet, even though they're all extremely close to one another. This is a video subjected to the history and playstyle of each character in Super Smash Bros. Brawl. And just because we're nearing the end doesn't mean we have to take a break away from the principal format of it. Link is a sword fighter character, but not in the sense of a sword fighter character like those in the Fire Emblem cast. He's more like a variety character, owing it not just to his sword granting him good range and disjoint, but also a slew of projectiles in his kit, each with their own unique purposes. Close range melee attacks specific to a few of his areas, an always equipped shield that can nullify small projectiles, and a grab range that isn't simply hand reaching, but tether length, that can also be used as a supportive recovery option. His general attributes and attacks are somewhat slow and laggy, so he relies on a campy playstyle a lot more than an offensive playstyle, which would cover more with the Fire Emblem cast with their tipper styled attacks and fear striking power swings. This variety set of his, unfortunately, does not save him from once again being put in the unviable positions of the tier list. I mean, look at his placement compared to his cartoony, smaller self. A whopping 23 spot difference. That is such a huge fucking stretch for someone with a similar movement and playstyle. So what gives? Well, simply put, frame data and general speed differences. Link's 3 fastest moves, at least in total animation length, counting IASA, and auto cancel, are jab 1, jab 2, and back air. Of course, this isn't counting moves and animations like throws, pummels, item tosses, yada yada. Most of Link's moves are well into the late 40s and 50s in terms of frame animation. And this is keeping in mind that a lot of these have uninterruptible points within the animation. His fucking down air forces him into an 85 frame uninterruptible lag animation that only has an auto cancel window on frame 65, well over a second. This is what no L cancel plus short hop auto cancel does to a motherfucker. Yeah, Toon Link has the same issue, but is more unpredictable due to its stall and fall nature, unlike Link, who descends at his airspeed when performing the move. His grabs are amongst the longest in the game too. No, not in the literal grab rank, but also in animation, all being well over a second, including his Zair. However, this one is saved by its auto cancel window being extraordinarily lenient, running through the whole animation, making this one of the few approach options that he has in his arsenal. He also has slow air acceleration, slow air speed, an above average gravity pull, a high falling speed, and a very high fast falling speed. This makes him vulnerable to chain grabs, follow-ups on many character throws, and although it does let him have good vertical endurance tied with his decent weight, it makes it harder for him to recover, especially given his slow drift when performing his up special, and also having a small double jump. He also has a run speed. In fact, his initial dash and run speed is only different by a value of 0.028. Not good. Although he does have somewhat stiff traction compared to the rest of the cast, it was still lowered, but not enough to ruin his out of shield options. Not like he has much of that anyways. More so enough to give him a good enough Dacus tied with the dash boost he gets when performing a dash attack. Although his Dacus covers a decent distance, it's probably in your best interest to go for anything else since up smash is still easy to fall out of for an opponent and can be punished more easily by said opponent. Link's projectiles are not bad by any means. Arrows work as a means of spacing out the opponent. Gale Boomerang gives Link an effective gimping option when edgeguarding opponents, whether on or off stage. And bombs are, well, bombs. Check Toon Link for that one. But what makes those projectiles work for Toon Link is that his fast ground and good airspeed allow him to effectively camp with them and break through a lot of dead zone between another projectile opponent or top tier with a lot of ground control. Link, meanwhile, cannot camp with them. His slow speed just doesn't allow for it, and even ranged fighter characters can easily bypass through a lot of these since air dodges are relatively safe and free to perform, which can also allow said opponents to capture his own items like bombs to use as retaliation. Link is ultimately hampered by the engine of Brawl. He retains all of his slow, sluggish attacks which do have quite the power stacked on them, but are more risky than rewardy to try to pull out, especially with his aerials. almost all of which have little to no landing lag reductions between Melee and Brawl. His slow air game gives him no chances of following up with aerials, even the faster ones. It makes him easy to juggle constantly. His even slower ground game also makes him too easy to camp against, even with his plethora of projectiles, and gives most other characters a better approach and pressure game against a character who is non-existent in those areas. To finally wrap this section up, his fall speed and weight are both a blessing and a curse. They allow him to survive much further, but that survivability is easily taken away the moment he's too far from ledge, as his aforementioned attributes in the air make recovering much harder, often relying on his tether to try to make it back quickly and safely. Once again, slow characters, unless given a variety of breakout options that help cover in some of their weaker areas, are doomed to fall in line with the rest of the low and bottom tiers of Brawl. Link had never gotten any good results at majors. Even IzAw's performance at Bushido Brawl Impact, a European Brawl tournament, is contested on whether its attendance status and continental location should determine it as a Brawl Major. Most other Link players, like Scissor and Legion, never played too much in Brawl Majors, preferring to stay within their local regions, SoCal and Midwest, where they got good tournaments results with the character, at least as good as they can for a bottom tier character. Plus, with Scissor's relatively recent 13th place at Apex 22, all done so with solo Link, I'd say it's a little more impressive to achieve something like that with such a bottom tier character. But don't expect this guy to make it out of bottom 5 in any future unless they discover some obscure bullshit boomerang bounce chain tether technique only viable on Yoshi's Island or whatever. Nah. Instead, we'll just go on to yet another slow character hampered by Brawl's engine. You thought this was a Triforce tier, buddy? Well, you're fucking wrong. This is just a slow man's tier, where everyone seems to walk in maple syrup. Probably explains why they're this far behind. Jigglypuff, ladies and gents.
You thought Sheik's drop between Melee and Brawl was bad? Or maybe you felt pity for all the Falcon mains going from Melee to Brawl, only to discover the character was not only the same man many knew him as, but I would put those guys aside as veteran and say that this character was the most nerfed character between the two games. And it's pretty ironic given that this character should have probably fit more with the physics and gameplay design of Brawl rather than any other character on this roster. Jigglypuff was a certified top tier in Smash Bros. Melee competitive play, with the best airspeed and acceleration along with some disjointed and powerful aerials made her a dangerous foe to be challenged in the air. And if you're a fast faller, you likely suffered from some sort of PTSD seeing this throw animation, because it was the last time you would ever see yourself on the stage again. Even if you didn't play as a fast faller, she still had many options against you, even at low percentages that could lead into her near fatal rest move. Just her physical presence created an aura that struck fear and disrepair into her opponent's eyes. That was supposed to say that she is unstoppable, but there's a reason why the top player had a 2-year dominant streak with the character, and also explains her position on the tier list. Now, although this is all way in the future, even past Brawl's meta, Jigglypuff was still heavily worked on between the transition from Melee and Brawl. Whoops. She was actually added late into the development. Turns out she barely scraped by when they added Sonic to the game, and it's unclear if these nerfs were done in line from player complaints or the rushed development cycle nearing the end of the game. But what matters the most is that Jigglypuff was nerfed hard in Brawl. Her air acceleration, although being high in Brawl, was dropped significantly in comparison to Melee and makes it closer to the rest of the cast than ever before. The same went for her airspeed, although the number rate wasn't as much as a significant drop compared to her air acceleration. She also has seen nerfs in almost all of her aerials. I say almost because although her down aerial has decreased SDI, it also has decreased hit lag, which means SDIing harder to escape. Also, since it has the chance to trip opponents, this can lead into a rest setup, the only possible one in the game, assuming the opponent has failed to SDI properly too. We'll get into the rest in a minute, but for her other aerials, they have either seen knockback decrease, damage decrease, alter angles to favor DI more, less juggling chances, especially with the new air dodging mechanic effectively making her juggling moves null, or her hitbox adjustments that no longer make it as powerful with spacing and edge guarding tool as before. This, along with the overall boost in recovery for most of the cast, limits her edge guarding game, though it's still her strongest feat. Plus, all of her aerials can auto-cancel in a short hop, making them a good approach and keep away options on limited range opponents, though the lack of disjoints doesn't make it as challenging as it was before. Her grab has slightly more reach and is safer overall, but her throws are bad. Her forward throw is absolutely pathetic. It's no longer a secondary kill option near ledge. In fact, it's not even a kill option at all. Up throw and down throw completely lost their combo setups, which means she has no guaranteed follow-ups on aerial or possible res, even at low percentages. And back throw. This one's still okay, but it's nothing special or out of the ordinary that's tied into it. She also has one of the most unsafe spot dodges. It does grant a 56% intangibility rate over vulnerability, but that's still a worse margin than the second worst spot dodge in the game, which is Bowser's, who has a near 69% intangibility rate over vulnerability, even with the extra length his animation takes. Her ground game was also nerfed, with weakened smash attacks in terms of damage and KO potential, and slightly unsafe dash and tilt attacks. Although, if you're playing Jigglypuff on the ground in a competitive environment outside of jab locking opponents, then what the hell are you doing? Really though, the most nerfed set of moves have to be her special. Specifically, one move has it worst out of all of them, but two others got it pretty bad too. Pound is still a decent long-lasting shield punishing move with use for recovering, but it deals less damage. It's easier to punish out of shield and has less rise, meaning it can't fall as long enough anymore. Her up special Sing also saw a pretty hard nerf with the way it puts opponents to sleep, as although she can still grab the ledge repeatedly when performing the move each time, it doesn't end up causing the opponent to fall asleep repeatedly if right next to her, only causing them to fall asleep once. This means Jigglypuff has to punish extremely quickly the moment they see the opponent fall asleep, compared to in Melee where she can do it a few more times in order to set up for a more perfect punish. Ultimately though, it was her rest that got worst of it all. I mean, did you honestly think a move that can kill opponents at sub 15% on most legal stages was going to be allowed? Here, let me show you a comparison. Jigglypuff hitting Mario with rest at center stage of Battlefield at 30%. Here's the exact same thing in Brawl. Yup! What you just have watched right now was a complete detriment of a character X Factor tool that dictated its playstyle. Granted, it does have increased base knockback, but the move has weaker knockback scaling, which is why it takes much longer for it to kill. It also deals much less damage even with the flower effect, since the flower can easily be mashed out of the body. This move has no kill potential up until 80-90% range unless your opponent has no idea how to DI or momentum cancel. Even then, that means it probably won't be able to KO until 70-75% range, because the move's nerf knockback doesn't really allow it to kill any earlier, even though the move sends at a near upwards launch angle. Good for always getting stars and screen KOs, bad for when you have to deal with opponents that have good vertical momentum and canceling. There's also no true combo potential that will lead to this move whatsoever, meaning it can only be hit off of either setups like ledge things or on a random read like a roll or early air dodge. Honestly, given the circumstances needed to kill using this move, it would probably be safer if you used smash attacks, since at least those have decent hitboxes, somewhat far launch knockback at similar percentages, and won't leave Jigglypuff as a sitting duck if she messes with them. Even if these nerfs aren't taken into account, the physics of Brawl being floatier and gameplay being much more defensive with air dodges, hitstone canceling, and better survivability weakens her design and puts her on the same level with most other characters rather than being one of the few as such in Melee's top play. Doesn't help that, unlike a lot of other characters, her survivability is pretty bad even when accounting for her really good recovery. And not only is she the lightest character in the game, but she also has zero good momentum canceling options. In Japan, she was actually considered the worst character in all of Brawl. Whether you agree with that or not is your opinion, but simply put, we can all agree that she had next to no tournament results significant enough to put in this video. Trust me, we tried to find one, and only 2 players were ever significant enough with the character. Daft Puffster, who eventually dropped her for Diddy Kong, and Hungrybox, who played just enough to be ranked 10th on the Brawl Florida Power Rankings. Though he did co-main King Dedede along with Jigglypuff, simply put, Jigglypuff is not needed when someone like Wario exists. Remember what we said earlier, Fat Puff? If that rings a bell. Truly end this off, Jigglypuff has probably the worst set of alternate skins on a simplified character. Okay, The sleepy hat is just fine, but no callback to the bow tie that was in both Smash 64 and Melee, and no return of the crown or green bandana. Like at this point, you might as well just hand me a naked circle while you're at it. It's fine. We'll just go on and talk about another floaty girl that has 0 tournament results, but likely has 100 not safe for work results on them. Wait, does Jigglypuff ever? Oh,
Princess Zelda comes in with her shit fundamentals and skills, just how it was back when she debuted in Super Smash Bros. Melee. Okay, maybe I'm being a bit too harsh on her. It's not like she was the worst, she was only bottom 3. Unfortunately, even with a whole game later, her tier placements aren't any different. At the start, the meta looked at her differently. She was seen as a mid to low tier character since she had gained a lot of buffs in the transition from Melee to Brawl, and with the meta not exceeding in an overall camp heavy defensive playstyle for its top tiers, and being immune to chain grabs, the biggest means of winning neutral at the time, she was seen as somewhat competent. That all changed when the players soon realized that there were more options than spamming rolls, air dodges, and trying to go for a grab when the opponent is a stage and a half away. She soon started to decline heavily, made even worse with a certain character, whom she had a near unwinnable matchup with, started dominating the playing field. So what options did she have? Very little. She was essentially boiled down to a stray fighter, one who has to rely on a few isolated moves to grant her kills or as a means of winning neutral. Down smash is her best move, as it has no multi-hit property tied to it, meaning no easy SDI to punish, and it sends at an angle that can send opponents to a good dip below the ledge, made better with increased knockback. She has a great grab range, which makes good use for her forward and back throw, most of which can reliably kill near ledge. Nehru's Love is still a decent means of edge guarding foes, and can actually give Zelda a recovery boost of performing the love jump. Most of her lightning kick aerials, forward and back aerial, are as good as they were before. In fact, even better, due to the increase in total knockback and damage when hitting the sweet spot. The trade-off is, it's now a one-frame, very tiny hitbox that if misses, gives Zelda pathetic knockback and damage, and is generally unsafe if so. Of course, her best move by a long shot is her down special, because it automatically jumps her up 12 spots on the tier list. Of course, noting the downtime she gets for performing the move, yada yada, watch the Sheik section again if you forgot. Otherwise, most of her moves may have great punish, but can be SDI'd, or very situational due to being laggy and generally unsafe. Another move like Din's fire, up throw, and down throw don't really have much use for them. I mean, you're gonna try and edge guard with a tiny fireball against a cast where the majority either have intangibility on their up special startup or get a quick boost the moment they perform it, and with the 2 throws, well, hit stun canceling and the floaty nature of Brawl basically remove their only purposes. Of course, it's not just a lot of her moves that are holding her back. Her mobility is absolutely awful in this game. Just like with Link, her biggest flaw is her awful ground game. However, unlike someone like Jigglypuff who can get around this by staying in the air with her excellent air mobility, Zelda is just simply meh in the air. It's not like her air acceleration or airspeed is bad, both are quite decent, but all of her aerials are pathetic to try and edge guard with outside of the one-frame lightning stomp down aerial hitbox. Up air tries to work as an anti-air move. Neutral air is very inconsistent with trapping enemies, and forward and back air, well, we already discussed those. Doesn't help, the best hitboxes on all her aerials are tiny ass sweet spots that will barely, if ever, land, even if trying to catch a bad air dodge or double jump. It's also somewhat bad for her to be in the air due to her lightweight, low gravity, and no good momentum canceling options. This makes it easier for her to die off the top than a lot of other characters. Same went for Jigglypuff, but Jigglypuff also has a good set of aerials, so arguably, it's worse for Zelda overall. She's also crippled by a weak out of shield game, a weak pressure game, a bad jump squat which limits her aerial approach, and a non-existent combo game outside of heavy fighters at low percents. Zelda can arguably be considered a glass cannon, except this glass cannon is far less potent glass and is trying way too much to fire huge cannonballs, only for it to collapse onto the glass cannon itself, rendering it useless. Damn, I should really be inspiring new poetry writers with that sentence. It's no wonder Zelda saw no results in tournaments. Honestly, you'd probably see more Zelda fan art from vendors in the area than any Zelda mains for Brawl, or for Melee, or for Smash 4, for Ultimate. Holy shit, Sakurai, just fucking scrap this white woman off your game! You'd probably save you and the balance team 5 months of developing doing that. On the real though, shout out to Geoix, running with Loza at Bushido Brawl Impact to get 2 together forever in their best solo placements yet. Also, shout out to Purple Guy again. As I said, he did duo the main tag team characters with mixed results, and Riot for ranking top 15 in the New England early Brawl rankings. rankings. May not have been top 10, and might have been because of his complementary playstyle in doubles, but was still ranked nonetheless. Listen, we're almost done here. You don't have to hear me or the others kicking a dead horse around any longer, but you'll be seeing a lot of kicking done by our next and final character in the meta, Ganondorf. Man, you know, for being the certified king of evil, he sure seems to suck at this whole evil thing. I mean, I get he wants to go for the one and only Hyrule Snow Bunny, but in this game it looks like he discriminates against anything and anyone that isn't a Snow Bunny.
We finally made it. We scraped down to the absolute bottom of the barrel. A character so bad, it begs to question how a character like this even slide past the balancing team. Where do I honestly begin? Ganondorf has some of the weakest parameters attached to a character. He is slow when he walks, he is slow when he runs, he is slow in the air, he is slow when he jumps. His jump height is rather slow, he is slow out of shield, and all of his moves are just slow. The only thing that he's fast in is his roll, air dodge, and spot dodge, which mostly meets with the average, and when he falls into the blast zone. Ganondorf is slow. Not only that, but he is heavy and has a bigger build. He becomes a very easy to combo at low percents, easy to lock in place, which is why his match with Sheik is one of the worst, and easy to chain grab. And oh my god, is he easy to chain grab. Almost anyone with chain grabbing capabilities can chain grab him, and anyone that can infinite him, like Ice Climbers with their chain grab or Diddy with their bananas, usually ended up worse for him due to his slow speed and sluggish punish moves. Speaking of punish moves, a lot of Ganondorf's moves are hard hitters, very good hard hitters, which make him less susceptible to stale move knockbacks, because Ganondorf doesn't care how stale his move is, he'll still kill you at 90% because he feels so. The real problem is landing these moves, safely at that, which he mostly cannot do. For one, some moves have distinct sour spots that when made contact with do less damage and knockback than the intended hit, making some moves unreliable at killing unless you're hitting off a hard punish. 2, they are very laggy or slow, whether standing, ending, or even throughout the whole animation. 3, none of his moves outside of like 2 are disjointed, and even then, these disjointed moves aren't as insane as the other disjointed moves like Donkey Kong's tilts or Martha Knight's attacks. Okay, so let's get this out of the way. If you are to ever play Brawl Ganondorf, here are some moves you should never even think about using in competitive play. Up tilt, down smash, neutral air, up throw, and neutral special. These moves are completely unreliable or insufficient for attacking or punishing your opponent except for a shield break or another Ganondorf player who's misinputted one of these moves. And even then, that's only 2 of these moves you should be using in any of those scenarios. If you honestly try to pull out a double hit on neutral area against a shield broken opponent, you deserve to lose your stock. Okay, so now let's take a look at some of the slightly better moves. Jab is his fastest ground attack option, though it is also the slowest jab in the game. Good means of shoving opponents away, and can even act as a way to finish up a combo on another move that'll be brought up in a bit. Forward tilt, a kick that is somewhat fast pushing out, pushes shielded opponents away, making it harder for them to reliably punish against Ganondorf. Not only does it have a good knockback at decent percentages, but it also sends them at a pretty nasty semi-horizontal angle, making this a death sentence for characters with short or linear recoveries. Down tilt is also a fast kick move of his, this time hitting more at a downward angle, meaning it can be low profile by some characters. Can also potentially lead into a jab if the opponent fails to DI correctly, and can reliably kill up around 140%. Up smash, his best smash attack, and effective for not only killing dummy early, but being somewhat safe due to his short ending lag. It also has a sort of a snake up to hitbox to where the move can't even hit you if you're not really close to Ganondorf. However, it does have high startup lag, so don't expect to just freely swing this big thing around the stage. Both forward area and back area are good kill moves horizontally and can be decent at edge guarding. Though with forward area you have to be a bit more cautious doing this off stage, but there are 2 really good aerials of his that we cannot skim over. Up aerial that is very fast on startup and end lag, gives him great cover, can KO at higher percentages, and can also work as a strong gimping move due to the low few hitboxes sitting at a very low angle. Then there is down aerial, which on its own isn't exactly spectacular besides being the strongest meteor smash in the game, making it good for completely obliterating opponents off stage. What it really shines in is its auto cancel window, just shy enough at being able to cancel the landing lag out of short hop if performed precisely. This means Ganondorf can easily put shield pressure on his opponent and get away from a possible punish, or depending on the opponent's percent, land a down air that can lead into something like jab, up smash, and aerial, or just straight up a KO to the top. If the move is performed a little late, it will lead to Ganondorf having a lot of landing lag, giving the opponent a free hit off of it. Finally, a flame choke, a command grab move that also works as a horizontal recovery option. Though it puts him into helpless, so it's not like it fixes his awful recovery, but it is still useful both grounded and in the air. When used grounded, it slams the opponent to the ground, and the way the move is designed, the opponent is unable to attack whatsoever. They can still do quick get up options, but this still gives a good amount of window for Ganon players to react in concurrence to what the opponent is about to do. Not only that, but Ganondorf has less landing lag than the opponent, meaning he can punish more quickly than the opponent can think of an option to perform. Meanwhile, its aerial version is just fine above stage, but off stage it can lead to a suicide KO, resetting the neutral in each character's damage, or potentially take the game off of final suicide stock. Finally, his grab range. Although short, it's pretty disjointed when performing a pivot grab, which also extends a bit of his reach, and his overall throws outside of up throw are all basic throws. Just depends when you use them and what part of the stage you're on. Otherwise, that sense can go for a lot of his other moves in one single turn. Situational. Since most of his moves are rarely used in matches because they often leave Gandalf in much more vulnerable positions if they whiffed or are blocked. Hell, that can be said for most of the moves already listed. It's just those are much better options for him in comparison to the rest. They aren't good options, but they're the ones that will more likely see him take 20 plus damage rather than a complete stock loss or trapped in disadvantage somehow. Even then, his moves effectiveness and frame data just pull him down in an already sinking quicksand that is simply his speed. He's just too slow, and even amongst the slower cast, they have their own tools to completely outplay Ganondorf even if they're on the lower spectrum of the tier. Bottom line is that Ganondorf's lack of speed, approach options, easy fold to pressure, horrible means of recovery, and weak advantage game no matter how much pure strength he has in him leads him to falling dead last in not only F tier, but of the entire current Super Smash Bros. Brawl tier list. Once again, as if it wasn't already learned from Bowser in Melee, slow and strong is not a good character trait unless the strength is literally near one-hit KO levels, or it can lead into one another. But as crazy as it may sound, Brawl Ganondorf actually had a very minor yet somewhat popular community of players that mained him, or co-mained him heavily. Hell, one of their players even won a tournament with solo Ganondorf. Granted, it was a Meta Knight banned tournament in a Rust Belt state with a max of 30 people, but there was still a notable name or two on that bracket and a bunch of characters that Ganondorf had absolutely shitty matchups in. So this is truly a shock, especially for a bottom tier since no other bottom tier had gotten any results like this before, especially the two mentioned earlier in this video. Even in Japan, he isn't ranked amongst the worst, and they have a much stricter stage list that heavily favors characters like Ice Climbers and Falco. Truly put, Ganondorf may not actually be the worst character in the game. Well, the tier list says otherwise. Thus, ergo, in conclusion, we wrap up by mentioning one thing that should further cement how awful Ganondorf is in Brawl, and that is his matchup chart. His matchup chart may be the single worst in the entire game. Nigh unwinnable against 5 characters, 3 of which are back-to-back top tiers, and is hard countered by 17 characters. 0 positive matchups, 0 even matchups. Everything is a negative for him. His average is the only one that is a -3. And the matchup numbers is insane. Look at the difference between him and the second lowest character on the matchup total, Zelda. It's a -33 difference. That is an insane gap. And between him and Meta Knight, is a margin so wide it will make the household income to home value gap light up. This is amongst the worst matchups in not just Brawl, but in all of Smash, at least for its recorded meta. No other character has it bad like this. Smash 64 Luigi has semi-favorable matchups against floating and slow characters. Smash Melee Bowser is even with Pichu, since Pichu is notoriously weak and can die off of one of Bowser's attack at a subpar percent range. In fact, Pichu actually has more negative margin than Bowser does, and every other game hasn't developed properly to make one, or is too busy jerking each other off to make one as a whole community. The only other character with as much as awful matchup chart as Ganondorf is Donkey Kong on the Japanese version of the Super Smash Bros. On the N64, including having widely considerable unwinnable matchup against Kirby, but even they don't use their own version of top competitive play anymore. So it's really just a shit out of luck for Ganondorf, but at least he'll go down as a character so bad that he has a spotlight in the meta along with Meta Knight as an example of polar opposites sharing the same game. Also, how not to design a fighting character of his design or archetype. Super Smash Bros. Brawl is an interesting game competitive-wise. The game was very centered on one singular character that dictated a lot of the matchups, stages, and outcomes. And though he was not the only viable character in the game, he did shut down a lot more characters from ever reaching a possibility of potential results that could only be seen in tournaments that banned him. Truth be told, most of these characters' flaws aren't purely just from bad matchups against Meta Knight or Ice Climbers. Some are just created this way, whether that's directly from developer input and changes made to the character, or somewhat more indirectly like the physics of the game and the added techniques and tricks that gave a lot of more characters favorable or unfavorable positions in given matches, settings, or scenarios. Even though the game completely neutered the skill level that was common in competitive Melee, it created its own unique meta with its own unique community around it, with its own unique matches, unique techniques, and unique playstyles, all coming from a similar yet unique gameplay for the Smash Bros. Series. All in all, Super Smash Bros. Brawl may be slow, floaty, heavily defensive, trip festive, hand holding, snooze pool, long drawn, cheap, baby busted, broken, and flat out less skill intensive than any other Smash game before or after. But it's one little thing that cannot be said for most other casual heavy games, and that is, well, a unique game.